Sam Asefa,
Here.
Nicole Capretz,
Here.
Frank Cardenas,
Here.
Sasha Kurgan.
Here.
Thank you. Moises Moreno Rivera.
Here.
Toksa Mashakan.
Thank you.
Present.
Rohan Radhakrishna.
Present.
Chancellor Juan Sanchez Munoz.
Here.
Milwaukee Schwartz.
Here.
And Karen Ross.
Present.
Excellent. We have a quorum.
I hear Karen's name. Glad you joined us with today. I didn't expect that. That's great.
Yes, sorry, I'm watching over you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. I'm glad you're here. So Matt will now share today's public comment procedures.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for everyone joining us today, whether in person, online, or by phone through the Zoom webinar platform, or where the meeting is being live streamed on SGC's YouTube channel or Cal EPA's livecast. I'm here to provide some information to help guide us through the process for this hybrid meeting, which we have designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, you will not be able to unmute your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform does not enable video for attendees, so we will not be able to see you. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have a question about the meeting, there are a few ways to contact us. If you're using the Zoom webinar, the best way is using the Q&A function. Several members of the SGC team are monitoring the Zoom Q&A to facilitate public access to the council meeting and may remove disruptive or threatening comment. If you have joined by phone and you have access to email, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. If you do not have access to email, you may text or call 916-634-3359. If you plan to make in-person public comment, you must fill out a comment card provided at the table near the back of the room. Please fill out the comment card and indicate your name and which item you would like to comment on. Please bring your comment card to the table to the front with the sign for collecting public comment cards. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we'll read the names of everyone who has submitted a form on that item. Please line up by the podium when I call your name in the order in which I've called it. When it's your turn to speak, I will call your name to the podium. If you plan to make remote public comment, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either through your desktop or phone. To make a public comment, visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the public comment form linked there. You need to complete separate forms for each item on which you wish to speak. You may complete a form at any time during the meeting. When the chair opens the public comment period for your item, we'll read the names of everyone who submitted a form. When you hear your name in the list, please raise your hand. To do this online in the Zoom webinar, click the raise hand under participants, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in by phone, you may press the *9 to raise your hand in the Zoom. When it's your turn to speak, a member of our team will unmute your microphone. If you're online, you'll see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You'll need to click the option to approve unmute, and after that, you can begin your comment. If you're on the phone, you'll hear a recorded message alerting you that your line is unmuted. Please begin your comment after you hear the recorded message. If you're unable to complete the online form but would like to make a public comment, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. Speakers requiring or using translation services are allotted 4 minutes to facilitate full participation. A timer will be screen shared. Please monitor the timer and wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on the phone, you'll be notified when your time is up. After that, we'll mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once we mute your microphone. Thank you, and I will hand it back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. We'll now move to item 3, which is the approval of the June 29, 2023 meeting minutes. I want to remind members need not be present for that meeting to vote on the minutes adoption, but may abstain. We'll have opportunity for council discussion first, then we'll have public comments. So I'll open it up to any council discussion on the minutes.
So moved.
Public comments?
We have no public comments on the side.
Moved by second.
Moved by Chancellor Munoz. We need a second.
I thought just great. Need a roll call.
We have a second, third.
Second by Deputy Secretary Kurgan. I will commence the roll call. Director Acefa,
Yes.
Public Member Capretz,
Yes.
Public Member Cardenas,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Kurgan,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Moreno Rivera,
Yes.
Secretary Mashakan stepped out, Deputy Director Radhakrishna,
Yes.
Secretary Ross,
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz,
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Yes.
We can hold the roll open for Secretary Mashakan when he returns. Or we don't have to.
Yeah.
Motion passes.
Great. Thanks. Now I would like to call Executive Director Lynn Van Cook Libert for item number 4, which is the Executive Director's report. Following that, we'll have the opportunity for council discussion and public comments.
Thank you, Chair Sefa. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here again today, and for those who are joining us virtually and in person as well. We always appreciate everybody gathering together. So for today, I'm going to provide a couple updates on interesting initiatives and things that the SGC staff have been working on, as well as a couple updates and reminders of some things that are coming. So first, I think it has been quite a while since we have brought to you more information about our participation in the California Fifth Assessment. But just as a bit of a reminder, the California Climate Assessment is a multi-year research effort with government, academic, tribal, and community partners to generate new data, original research, and synthesis on the ways that climate change is impacting California's diverse communities. Now, the SGC Climate Change Research Team is leading the engagement efforts within the California Fifth Climate Assessment. And this is done in partnership with the Natural Resources Agency, the Energy Commission, and the Office of Planning and Research. Now, this summer and fall, as you can see from these pictures, the Fifth Assessment Team is hosting 9 in-person regional workshops all across California. And during these workshops, the interagency team is inviting the public to review the draft framework for the regional synthesis reports, identify local priorities that can be addressed through the Fifth Assessment, and connect potential author teams. Through these workshops, we'll be communicating how informing the Fifth Assessment is an opportunity to uplift local and regional priorities so that the final reports can be a resource for addressing them. And then following the regional engagements, the team will compile an engagement summary and begin establishing regional author teams to develop the reports. As we get closer to that time, we'll share back with the council so that you can have access to those summaries. Now, next, we've shared previously that we are launching a new initiative with SGC called Connecting Communities. And the focus here is on connecting the SGC program partners to federal opportunities through funding, private and philanthropic dollars. And so really exciting, we are ready to launch our first phase of this, which will be a $2 million technical assistant contract, which we'll be offering to project partners all across the state to help them access near-term federal opportunities. So we'll be able to announce our contractor in the very near future, and then we'll start the process of reaching out and coordinating with partners all across the state. So really the purpose of this $2 million is to help SGC's current and unawarded applicants access federal grants like the EPA Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grants, as well as other federal opportunities that have the Justice 40 initiative included in their mandate. So we are internally going through the process of identifying candidates for this support, really looking at folks who have put in applications and have been received funding, as well as those who put in applications and were not able to be funded because of oversubscription rates within our programs. But we'd also welcome and invite feedback from the council as well about additional programs that you may have in your portfolio that would be ideal candidates to be supported through this work. What we're going to do with this contract is we're going to provide partners with capacity building and federal application assistance to really help bring the community project plans to fruition. And we're just in the very, very final steps of issuing this contract and look forward to announcing this award and kicking off this new program very soon. Now, in tandem with the Connecting Communities initiative, we have also been very active over the last few months in working with state partners to ensure the benefits of federal solar energy and storage projects reach underserved communities across California. So just a couple things that we're working on. We are participating in an interagency working group that is led by California's Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, also known as iBank, to develop the California's Solar for All application. Through this, the Solar for All program is a $7 billion funding opportunity that is managed through the US EPA and is designed to expand the number of low-income and disadvantaged communities primed for residential solar investment. Now, the goal of this program is to enable millions of low-income households to access affordable, resilient, and clean solar energy. California as a state is eligible for $400 million of these resources, and we envision that a portion of this could be administered through the Strategic Growth Council. SGC is also supporting the state's strategy for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's National Clean Energy Investment Fund, which is more commonly known as the Federal Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or even more colloquially, Green Bank. And this new fund, which was funded through the Inflation Reduction Act, also aims to provide accessible, affordable financing for tens of thousands of clean energy projects across the country. The process is underway, and we'll share more as we advance through this work with the iBank. And then finally, SGC is one of the state departments that is working to get certified by the US Department of Energy so that our state dollars can help applicants unlock the clean energy funds at the Department of Energy Loan Program Office. So as we engage with these federal applications and work through these processes with our state partners, we are elevating our experience working with grantees in this space to make these federal opportunities accessible to communities who need the most, as well as to support funding solution for SGC's oversubscribed programs. Now next, I'm very pleased to share that the first California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force meeting is tentatively scheduled for mid-October. We have entered a contract with the College of Continuing Education at California State University, Sacramento, to serve as a facilitator for this new Land Equity Task Force. Right now, we're going through the process of one-on-one discussions with each of the task force members that you can see up on the slide. I'm really beginning to understand their expectations and aspirations for the task force, as well as identify specific training and briefing needs. We'll use information from these discussions to inform the task force charter and bylaws, which will be presented for adoption at the first meeting. We are very much looking forward to the policy recommendations the task force will develop over the coming 2 years to increase access to agricultural land for food production and traditional tribal agricultural uses. Now, over the summer, the SGC has hosted 2 Catalyst regional tables in Inland Empire and in Oakland. Now, during these events, which were follow-on from our conference in February, we watched short films that were highlighting the local community, heard from practitioners advancing climate equity and resiliency work, and connected with local community members on how they're working to advance equitable climate plans and projects. Now, following our last year's conference and the resulting summary report and these regional roundtables, we are excited to announce our 2024 Catalyst Conference, which we'll be putting on in collaboration with the Milken Institute. This will be, again, February 1st and 2nd, but now 2024, and it will be hosted at the Natural Resources Agency. So thank you so much for accommodating us here in Sacramento. Again, we will be bringing together approximately 300 leaders in climate equity and resilience, and we'll be focusing on the theme progress in place from power building to project implementation, and really harnessing the energy of all the participants to think about how we can take this incredible programs and finance that have come to play and get them into projects in the ground. So please save the date, and we will come back to this council for a conversation about the goals and outcomes of the conference. And finally, just a reminder that our October 25th council meeting will be a traveling meeting. So we will be going to San Diego. Thank you, Councilman Kretz, for the invitation. And look forward to a morning of activities and events, followed by the council meeting in the afternoon. So for those who may be listening as well, please also save the date and plan to see us in San Diego. And following Matt's reminder on public comment, turn it back to Chair Acefa for discussion. Thank you.
We lost your audio on that one.
I'm sorry. It's not recorded? Oh, sorry about that. I just wanted to note to the council that at the next October meeting, we'll have our required elections for the chair and the council, the vice chair. Every 2 years, SGC by statute is required to elect a new chair and vice chair. So that will be on the agenda and the October at our October meeting. Now I will open it up for council discussions on Ben's reports.
Right here.
Councilor.
Yeah, please.
No. I was bringing attention to your
okay.
microphone.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you, Lynn, as always, for an excellent report. And I want to congratulate you on the technical assistance program. As you know, because you are coming down to San Diego twice in the next few months, my organization is hosting a climate summit, and it's focused on how do local communities access these state and federal climate resources. And also, my organization is working with CivicWell on helping some smaller under-resourced cities already sort of figure out what grants they might want to apply for. But the first thing they say to us is, we do not have the capacity or the resources or even know how to write grants. So the fact that you are offering this technical assistance, I know you already know this, but I can just continue to reinforce how pivotal it is. And hopefully it will just set the standard for the whole nation, frankly, that other states will see this model and replicate it for their equity communities. So thank you so much. Also, I just want to make a comment because I find it amusing. It's related to the summit and the Agricultural Equity Land Use Committee. I got a phone call to our main line, and I rarely answer it. For some reason, I answered it. And this woman was saying, so what Kumeyaay voices are you having at your climate summit? And, really, really pointedly kind of holding my feet to the fire. Totally fine. And I said, so I told her we do have some speakers, but she was not satisfied. First of all, they were all men. That was not acceptable. And two, she wanted more. And she just had a very strong point of view, which I loved. And then the next thing I know, she says, also, I'm on and by the way, she had no idea that I'm on Strategic Growth Council. And she says, I just got recently appointed to this agricultural land equity. And I'm like, wait a minute, the Strategic Growth Council, and I was like, are you Emily? Yes, you're the San Diego representative from Kumeyaay. This is amazing. Yes, this is all meant to be. This is amazing that you randomly called me. She did not know anything about my role here. And anyhow, she's now speaking at the summit. She was trying to find somebody else. And I was like, actually, you have quite a compelling voice and point of view, and you should be a key speaker. And so that's going to happen. But I just find it, because you just put the photo up of those members, that it was I just love just how it all came together. And now we're like talking all the time, and obviously she just has such amazing insight and ideas, and she's clearly like a rising star. So I'm excited for her role here at the state, but also that she's going to, we're going to help continue to elevate her voice and ideas in San Diego. Yeah. I thought you'd appreciate that little random connection. You'll meet her. Well, obviously you already know her, but yeah.
Thanks, Nicole. Secretary Ross, Karen.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you again for your report. And I originally had a question on the technical assistance, because $2 million is a lot, but California is a very big state. And I'm just, I was curious if this was just making sure people knew where, kind of like the toolkit of here's where to access, but then you answered the question on capacity building, because everyone's so under-resourced. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to build on this technical assistance grant with maybe some train the trainer to get more regionally based folks that might be in a position to help with that, or organizations that have been doing that, but with the new flow of federal funds in particular, may be a bit overwhelmed and they'd like to bring on another person. I keep thinking about this next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be an unusual amount of money, and we want to make sure we've equipped every community possible in doing that. So that was my question about that. And that's exciting to hear your story about the Land Equity Task Force.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary Ross. So The first year of this technical assistance contract is really focused on some of the near term federal opportunities, but we purposely have some of the money that is unprogrammed so that we can build on ideas and solutions such as the train the trader type of program. So as we get up to speed with our contractor, and also as we're doing our landscape assessment of what the needs are of communities that are ready to apply, interested in applying, and really seeing what they need, I think you'll see that we have the flexibility to be able to do quite a bit with this pot of money. The other thing that I think is important to note too is that we are in coordination with I know the federal TIC-TAC, which that's the acronym. Not 100% sure what all those letters are, but essentially this is the technical assistance provider that's been funded through the US EPA to also support in a similar capacity around the state, but also the region. And so I think that there's also a lot of opportunity for us with our contract to be able to work in close partnership with the TIC-TAC that's covering the state. And so I think that with that combination, we can be really creative and innovative about what we do with these vital resources.
That's great. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
My follow-up question was going to be how you were coordinating with the TIC-TACs. US EPA and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment last week held workshops around EJ Screen and Cal Enviro Screen 4.0 to better equip communities as to how they apply for grants using these tools and how they leverage those tools. And one of the big follow-ups for those workshops was a commitment to collaboration between US EPA and Cal EPA in that matter. However, as you're developing these grants, that collaboration should not just be with Cal EPA, of course. So the way that the council intersects and connects with other folks here and leverage the expertise within the council, I think that would also be beneficial.
Great feedback.
Mr. Chair, just an observation, not a question. Lynn, I think you're hearing clear direction of support for this activity, and I want to commend you and the office for going out, whether it's in Merced or San Diego, and interacting with these communities to hear directly. You talked about, and they're quoting you, there will be flexibility to respond to the needs as expressed in these meetings, because not everyone can come to Sacramento, particularly not from as far as San Diego. And one of the reasons that they don't take advantage of these programs is because they haven't the human or technical capacity to take advantage, nor do they have the human capacity to take the trip up here to acquire the technical expertise. So I think Senator Ross is right. This is a substantial amount of money, but it's not enough money. But as you learn how to scale that 2 million to a value of 8-9 million in terms of how it's deployed, these and other funds, I think what you're hearing from this side of the dais is strong support for this general activity, providing where needed, as needed, technical assistance and what have you, so that everyone has a fair opportunity to avail themselves of all the programs that are being developed.
Just one more, and building on that, thank you for your report. And one item that you mentioned that I really appreciated is within TA, I think you said that there could be space to explore whether or not other programs that are oversubscribed and communities that have applied for those programs could also benefit. So I look forward to the opportunity for staff to work together to identify those types of programs that would be good fits. And I think it would be so beneficial to continue communicating that the state is hearing when our programs are oversubscribed, and that we're not only asking people to apply, but that we're trying to tell their story and connect them to other opportunities, even if it can't be us. Thanks.
I just want to comment on sort of the planning for the next meeting. I think being out in the community is a critical part of, I think, our work. We have discussed this in the past, that we need to be out, but also engage on the projects that we fund, instead of just sitting here on the dais and, looking at guidelines and voting as we will today on a very, very important project later on the agenda. But it is really critical, and this is something I think we've all talked about. It's a two-way process. We learn a lot more when we are on the ground, talking to the people who are actually making it happen. This applies to capacity building as well. I think you learn a lot more about some of the gaps that they have, and it will help inform our programs and initiatives. So we really appreciate you planning for that one. And it sounds like an exciting meeting. Yes, Frank, please.
Mr. Chair, thanks. I, among with my colleagues, very much look forward to experiencing Nicole's gracious hospitality down in San Diego in a couple of months, and I hope to be a hospitable host sometime next year when we have a convening, hopefully down in Los Angeles. And if we do, when we do, I think among the things that we will hear are community voices speaking in gratitude and support for our community resilience centers, which are already making an impact down in the Southland. And so in that connection, I might direct people's attention to, there's an article which is in our executive director's report from what is now known as LAist down in the Southland about the community resilience centers down in the LA area. And there's some very terrific quotes from Coral Abbott and from Amar Azucena Seed. And I think we should all take a look at that. It's very heartening to vote on funding projects up here, but then to read about it, and then when we come down to LA and San Diego, to actually hear from the people who are benefiting from these investments, it really brings it all home. And so I appreciate the chair's interest and your driving force in getting out there to listen to people. Really appreciate it.
That should also give Nicole an incentive to be a great host when we're there, so, because she's going to compete with you the next meeting. Great. So anyone else? So we'll now take public comments. Do we have any?
We have one public comment on this item. It is a virtual public comment. For our virtual public commenter, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking the raise hand function under participants, which you can find at the bottom of the screen on the Zoom platform, or pressing *9 on your phone. Our public commenter for the executive director's report is Emily Burgueño. Emily, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin your public comment.
Alka nya Emily Burgueño wina chuhi matlas ponang kupai napum sinel kutum kupai nya pipa napum help me up. McAnyway. Hello, my name is Emily Burgueño, and I am from the Esquinon Village, also known as the Ipe Nation of Santa Isabel, where I'm an enrolled tribal citizen. Also from the Sinalkutum Village, which is the Manzanita Band of the Kumeyaay Nation. And these are two bands within 12 federally recognized Kumeyaay bands here in San Diego, California. I'll go through some of the notes I had during. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing your update. And thank you, Nicole, for sharing your kind words. I would recommend identifying tribes that are not included in the climate assessment efforts and prioritizing some outreach and communication with those tribes that are not included or have yet to be included anyway. Secondly, the solar funding, ensuring, it's a great opportunity, a great specific, a significant amount of funding to support solar accessibility to Californians. And I just want to ensure that this is going to include the protection of cultural and natural resources. The slide that was shown had a picture of a solar panel on a house, but if there are any solar farms being developed from this funding, that it ensures the protection of cultural and natural resources, and including tribal Native American monitors who work alongside archaeologists during these projects. And I have two more notes. I see my time is up, but the TA funding recommending a set aside for tribal nations to ensure they receive and can implement this opportunity. And it sounds like I should reach out to Nicole, but if there are others that I need to reach out for the San Diego meeting, I needed to understand if this was a council meeting or a regional meeting open to the public. And I would like to support the council to ensure this space is accessible and welcoming to the Kumeyaay Nation tribal leadership and neighboring tribes within San Diego and around San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Emily.
May I respond quickly? Just thank you, Emily, so much for the comment and the feedback, and for the meeting in October in San Diego. This is an open meeting to the public. It will be a council meeting of this nature, but those are always open to the public, both for in-person and virtual attendance. And then we will have activities and a presentation the morning before the conference, before the council meeting as well, that will also be open to the public. So we will get that agendized and posted on our website as soon as possible, so that folks in the San Diego area and beyond have that information in advance.
Great. Talking about public comments, it's great to see more and more people coming in person to these meetings, and I really appreciate those who are here for these meetings. Any more public comments?
That concludes public comment on this item.
Great. And now we'll move to item 5, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar is for items that are non-controversial. So I'll ask Lynn to give us an overview of the items for consent calendar. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair Safa. We have one consent calendar item, and this is a adjustment to the round 4 guidelines for the Transformative Climate Communities program. And what is asking the council for is for round 4 to align with round 5 in relation to removing the cap on the size of the solar installations on residential units. Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Great. Do we have public comments on
We have no public comment on this item.
Great. Any questions, comments from council? Do we vote on this, right? One forward. Nicole moves.
Move to approve the consent
Item.
calendar.
Fox.
Do you need a second? I'll second that motion.
Have a second by Fox.
Oh, sorry about that. Seconded by Tokes. Yes. Sorry about that.
We'll move to roll call
Ross did
vote.
not hear me.
Director Sefa,
Yes.
Public Member Capretz,
Yes.
Public Member Cardenas,
Yes.
Secretary Deputy Secretary Kirgan,
Yes.
Deputy Secretary Moreno Rivera,
Yes.
Secretary Omashakin,
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishna,
Yes.
Secretary Ross,
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz,
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Schwartz.
Yes.
The motion passes. Great. This next item is a very important item. I think SGC will be making another history. So I'm excited to hear item 6, which is an action item to approve staff recommendations for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Round 7 Awards. I'd like to invite Lynn once again and HSC Senior Analyst Jessica Lopez to present the item. Then we'll have council discussion followed by public comments.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amada Sanasid, Deputy Director for Community Investments and Planning within the Strategic Growth Council. And I'm going to just give a quick thank you, gratitude for this next round before we invite Jessica up here. So again, I want to extend the gratitude to all of our partners on this program, Housing Community Development, CARB staff, as well as our AHSC team within the Strategic Growth Council for all of their methodical work, dedication to community within the guidelines, the key staff that supported, and then our enterprise and California Coalition for Rural Housing for their technical assistance with community. All of this is a partnership that I think exudes how our program is run and why it's important to really fund affordable housing and sustainable transportation. So I'm going to bring up Jessica Lopez so we can get into round 7 awards.
All right. Or very much echo the sentiments of thanks to our applicants, partner review agencies, and to council for setting up great guidelines for this round. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So we're here today to ask council to approve staff recommendation to award $757,471,361 from fiscal year 2021-2022 cap and trade revenues, along with disencumbered funds from previous AHSC rounds to 21 projects across the state of California. And these projects are listed in Appendix A of the staff report. With this action, agency will have invested $3.1 billion over the span of 7 rounds. So really a great milestone for us and for the council. If you could, yes.
Can I ask you to pull
Oh,
the mic
closer? Oh,
forward?
so
Yeah,
sorry.
please. Thanks.
Should I repeat the staff recommendation? No, perhaps not. Just to reiterate, this would bring 3.1 billion invested over 7 rounds for AHSC. So really a great milestone for the council. If we could go to the next slide, please. So just a couple of quick stats from these projects. These 21 projects achieve almost all our statutorily required and council approved goals. We have awarded 1 project in each of the 8 regions. The map to the left kind of lists out where we've awarded them. We have funded a tribal project, which is a council approved goal. We have funded at least 50% of our funds go to designated disadvantaged communities. And we have also awarded 35% of funds to transit-oriented development projects, 35% to integrated connectivity projects. And while we didn't reach our 10% rural innovation project area goal, we did award both rural projects that applied. So they received about 55 million. In addition to bringing housing to 16 jurisdictions, it's creating 2,500 homes with 55-year affordability covenants. These homes will actually house 37,000 people throughout the lifetime of the covenant. Additionally, these 21 projects fund the purchase of 150 zero-emission vehicles, over 50 miles of bikeways, more than 40,000 feet of crosswalks of new and repaired accessible walkways, in addition to dozens of crosswalks, curb ramps, and not to mention the urban greening components. These all combined reduce over 800,000 of MTCO2e and greenhouse gases, so quite a big reduction as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this kind of slide lists out all of the 21 projects, project name, applicants, our units, and the funding amount. And it's very easy to kind of get lost in all of these numbers and statistics, but it's important to keep in mind the real impact these projects have. So I'm going to go into highlighting 3 key projects, but just to say, and just to underscore that all awarded AHSC projects have to be all electric design. All of them are providing 5 years of free internet service to the restricted units. All of them include bike and pedestrian improvements. All of them include a program component, which includes things from active transportation programs to HD resident support. So like programs for the residents of the affordable housing developments. So really big accomplishments for each of these projects, and really proud to recommend them. If we could go to the next slide. And the following one. So the first one we'd like to highlight is the Eureka Scattered Site Project. This was brought together by the City of Eureka, Link Housing, and the Humboldt Transportation Authority. Given it's a scattered site, these are 3 unique sites that are providing 90 affordable homes. Through the project, they're also purchasing 2 electric microtransit vehicles, which will really serve the needs of the community. And additionally, they're creating a new trailway and bike boulevard that connects their downtown to another key center, which is called the Henderson Center, which has over 100 local businesses and other key destinations. The next project we have is the the Kashaya Windsor Housing Project. This is brought together by the town of Windsor, the Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians of Stewart Point Rancheria, Burbank Housing, and the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit or SMART District. This project brings 54 affordable homes. It's a mixed-use building, which has office space for the tribal headquarters, public gallery, that will host community events and outreach. And through this project, they fund the purchase of one electric bus, which actually has a great impact on their headways, reducing it by over 30%. And then lastly, the last project we want to highlight is the Riverwalk Phase 1 project. This was brought together by the City of San Diego, Wakeland Housing and Development Corporation, and the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System, or MTS. This project brings together 190 affordable homes, and it's also a mixed-use building that includes a community room with computer stations, kitchen, and workshop space. And actually, through their workforce development program, they are partnering with a local San Diego nonprofit that provides tuition-free apprenticeships in their culinary, baking, and kind of restaurant industry. So really great connection there. And then for their transit component, they're actually constructing a new trolley station. And this trolley station will directly connect to the MTS Green Line, which connects to downtown San Diego and other key destinations throughout the city. So all that to say, AHSC, we're really proud of all of our awarded projects. This is just a snapshot of some of them. And we hope that council approves our recommendation to award these 21 projects. Thank you.
Great. We will now move to public comments.
Council comments.
We do public comments first?
We can.
Public comments or council comments?
We can start with council comments first. So I will, yeah.
Oh, okay, just a couple. Oh.
Oh, no, please, after you.
Oh, I beg your
Go ahead,
pardon.
Chancellor.
I leapfrogged. I apologize. Just a few observations. First of all, my campus community is in the San Joaquin Valley, so I'm going to brag a little bit about the projects, 3 or 4 that are there, and just say 3 things about each. First of all, the Fresno project, the Dakota project, is so important. I get that right? Because it involves veteran housing, which I think is tremendous. The Lemoore project is, if you've ever driven to Lemoore, I have driven. You may miss it. It's a remote area that almost never attracts this kind of support. It's very difficult to build there. And so this is extraordinary. And then finally, the Modesto project, which has the promise of attaching to ACE, the Altamont corridor, and which has serious implications, not just from Modesto to Livermore and up further into San Francisco, Silicon Valley, but eventually what will be the high-speed rail, which is supposed to, fingers crossed, right, from Bakersfield to Fresno to Merced. They have the leg from Fresno to Merced almost done, and then north to the Altamont, right? And so having this there in Modesto is really critically important. So again, an area of the state that is often, let's just say, less successful at procuring these kinds of dollars have 3 out of 4 times. I just want to express my appreciation on behalf of those communities that are going to be improved because of these awards.
Thanks, Chancellor. Before I go to talks, I want to recognize Secretary Yana Garcia and Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez have joined us in your absence. Moy and Sasha were fantastic. Thank you. With that, talks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chancellor, look forward to the ribbon cutting with you on the high-speed rail at some point in the future. Look, I want to start off with the director and her team. You guys are missing a lot of confetti and balloons for this such a tremendous accomplishment in announcing this. We should be way more excited than we are today. Yeah, absolutely. Please give them a hand. $800 million to address affordable housing challenges in the state, which are very much needed. And the fact that you're, again, doing it across the state, not in one specific pocket is huge. And I know the Secretary Castro Ramirez will very much agree with that. But the part that's the most exciting to me about this is the holistic nature that you've taken to make these awards in your analysis. 150 zero emissions buses, the connections to existing transit, 50 miles of bikeways that are going to be a part of it, trees, lighting, all the things that are going to help people in improving their mobility and access to mobility. We always say, as Secretary Castro Ramirez talks about housing as a climate strategy. It can't be a climate strategy if it's not being connected in a strategic way to transportation, to multimodal transportation. And you've done that here. So many kudos again to you and your team for the work to create such a hopefully very impactful project recommendation list with nearly $800 million. So many kudos to you. Thank you.
I will echo those sentiments. I think that we should celebrate more, but more importantly, I think if you recall, council members who were here last December, we passed a resolution that we should have a coordinated effort on our housing policy and housing investments. I think time and again we've seen from this body, as well as the governor over the last few years, really hitting home around the issues that we're dealing with are so interconnected. And so the solutions that we actually bring also should be interconnected. Yes, it's about climate. It is about equity. All of these projects are located where there's significant access to jobs, to schools, to transportation, to alternative modes of transportation, better communities. And these are the kinds of transformative projects that the state and should be, funding. And it is really great to see. I'm not going to call out any individual projects, but the incredible diversity of the projects, the types, and how they leverage a significant amount of other investments because of that. This is not the end goal. It's a catalyst for significant other transformative programs and projects that could be leveraged through this. And I am looking forward to discuss with Secretary Castro Ramirez in terms of how we need to hit home in our communication and engagement around how interconnected all of these are, from equity, climate. Everybody knows that the state needs housing. Right? So it's not just about the numbers and the units and the 2,500. It's just how transformative they are to the actual people, policewomen who cannot afford to be in the city and drive hours to provide service into an expensive town, now can find a home that she can afford in one of these places closer to where all the other amenities are. This is truly transformative to individuals who can't have, access not only for housing, but for all other opportunities and amenities. So it is really exciting and to be, celebrated. There will be more opportunities for us to actually go out and talk about this. And the body has asked in the previous comment that we made. I think it's really important that we engage in going out and seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And I want to thank, a lot of you here, your departments from transportation, from Cal EPA, Secretary HCD. It is really an all of government approach that is actually making projects like this a reality.
You got virtual, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, Secretary Castro Ramirez, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I am so sorry that I could not be there in person, but let me just start with this.
Fantastic.
I completely agree. We need to celebrate more. We work so hard. The communities that we're serving work so hard every single day. And so it is, I think it was so well said, Secretary Omashakin, that we need to do more of, in terms of celebrating and lifting up the work of the Strategic Growth Council, and of course, the work that is taking place in communities as they're continuing to link housing, transportation, energy, climate, all of the things that we know are so important to improve the quality of life for families, for veterans, for seniors, for children. And so it's so great that we are gathered to take a vote soon on just over $750 million to 21 projects. And I really appreciated in the staff report the call out and the focus on people. 37,000 people will be served over the time of these units, and essentially all of the amenities that are being provided. I think it's so important that we continue to track the impact based on the number of people and families that are being served, and so very much appreciate Strategic Growth Council adding that number to the overall impact of these investments. I also very much appreciated that the projects that were highlighted were projects that show sort of the beautiful connection between housing and transportation and climate, and of course, that advance our equity goals. And also a reminder that these investments in producing over 2,500 units, these are 2,500 units that are going to be affordable for 55 years. Right. And so it's a long-term investment. Couldn't agree more. We need to do more of celebration with these communities that are getting these projects off the ground. And, the Strategic Growth Council as a team, as a staff, working with all of us who serve on the council. Of course, I do want to acknowledge our department that is also working very closely with SGC, the Housing and Community Development Department, led by Director Velasquez. And Chair, thank you for also acknowledging Sasha Kurgan, my Deputy for Housing. She's very also instrumental in being part of this team effort. And so I look forward to the vote when we're ready for that. Love the fact that there are so many projects, very diverse, from the heart of South LA all the way to San Francisco, to the Balboa Reservoir. And of course, Councilmember Munoz, very much appreciated you sort of calling out the projects that are in the Central Valley. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sue. Thank you for those comments. Secretary Ross.
I hesitated to raise my hand after seeing the secretary's moves, but I can't hold back my enthusiasm. First of all, I agree with all the comments that have been made about the comprehensive nature of this. But what I wanted to do in particular are two things. I'm always going to take advantage of every time I get a chance to comment how important these projects are for saving our prime farmland, especially in some of the rural communities that we see, but also the critical importance of affordable housing in our rural communities. That's where many folks are driving long distances to do the jobs in larger cities like a Sacramento, for example. But it's also the home for many of our food and farm workers, whether it's in processing plants, food service and hospitality, and high cost tourism areas. So these kinds of projects really show other communities what's possible. But what I really wanted to speak to is this is the vision of that legislation that passed so many years ago. And it took a few rounds to work this out. And it is a huge compliment and a tribute to the staff from so many agencies coming together to work in this way. And equally important is to the leadership of my colleagues here on the council that have really had that shared vision and have really made sure that we're all going in the same direction on this. So I just say thank you to all of you. These are great projects. And the fact that we've now got one that has some workforce development involved. It just shows the new level of what we can bring to these types of projects. So thank you, everyone, and congratulations. I don't want to get ahead of the vote, but I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Anyone, Rohan, please.
On behalf of Health and Human Services, we want to add some confetti and balloons to this growing party. Our secretary strongly believes that there is no medicine more powerful than housing. And as Secretary Omashakin said, this is much more than that. It's the holistic view. So really appreciate Staff Member Lopez's examples that went into detail of apprenticeships that create a sense of purpose and place and meaning, and electric buses that will improve air quality, and the walkways and the bikeways. It's more than the units themselves that will create a healthy sense of place and reduce chronic disease and have multiple benefits. So we're so excited from our agency to be on this journey to create healthy, sustainable communities. I thought 757 was a type of plane. I didn't know we'd be voting on that number of million to support these efforts today. So really excited for this vote.
That is pretty good.
Cool.
Oh, thank you. Yes, congratulations to everybody involved. Kudos to staff and all the work that you've done to make this all happen. So happy to share in the celebration. I just want to point out a few things just because it's an opportunity and a platform, so talking about housing. And there was some news, and I did share this with Lynn in San Diego, but I know it applies to the whole state, that there is a concern that there's a risk of apartment construction being able to be financed, given the high interest rates and cost of materials, cost of labor, and that actually it's the new apartment construction is plunging, which will affect AHSC. And so it just made me want to at least ask the question and get a conversation started at some point about whether the state could intervene in helping to reduce the cost of financing, because it seems all the experts are saying that this is something that they're very concerned about, because obviously we are proving here today how important and valuable having a home is, and apartments are a really important part of that picture. So I just want to put that out there and just sort of seed that idea of having the state explore options for how to keep construction moving forward. The other thing, because I'm with a climate organization, I will just continue to highlight how exciting it is that all of these, every single unit will be all electric. So these are very healthy homes, and that I think this is setting a new standard for the industry. We have been trying in San Diego to take this grand idea that we had at SGC and AHSC to start with an incentive for all electric last year, and then this year move forward with requiring all electric, because you had such, I think, 100% compliance, and the affordable housing developers said we could make it happen. And I did reach out to Secretary Ramirez, and she responded gracefully and gave me some great insight. But we are trying to get our local pot of housing dollars to incentivize all electric, and we're talking to developers to make, to check in and see how they're feeling about it. And then one of the comments that we got was that because a lot of these developments they have to leverage dollars from different sources, that if one source says you got to make it all electric, but a different source says you don't, it can impact their ability to make sure that the drawings and the construction designs are all electric. And so anyhow, just this kind of disparity in these different pots of funding, I think is slowing down our ability to fully transform our buildings to be all electric, and therefore a lot healthier. And so I just want to, and obviously accelerate our transition away from fossil fuels, which is, don't need to explain what's going on in the world right now with the climate crisis, but it certainly is an imperative that we do everything in our power to make that happen. And obviously, as California goes, so goes the world. And so I really want us to continue to lead in that arena. So I just want to again highlight how we can continue to have a conversation about consistency amongst all local, regional, state housing pots of funding, so that everybody can get to where AHSC is. Because again, I really want to elevate how much of a model AHSC is in setting the standard. So extraordinary work and incredible that you're making this happen. We just kind of want to keep it going and accelerate that progress. So thank you very much. And then the last comment is that just looking at the map, and I say this every time, so this is just, I'm just always going to elevate that the Bay Area, I mean, they had and so it blows my mind. They had 17 applications. I mean, no other area of the state even comes close. And they got 8, and that's, kudos to them. But San Diego had 1 of 2, we had 2 applications, 1 qualified. Like, what is going on? I can't figure it out. And I know we've had multiple conversations about it, but something is going on. Because, well, these are all, did you say population? Because it's, or did you not?
No, I did not, but
it's
a big population, 10 million people roughly.
Yes, but I think aren't these regions roughly equal in size? I'm actually not sure. Oh, well, San Diego's still pretty large. It's 3 million. But my point is, like, why are the developers in the Bay Area, or why are their applications, or why is there such excitement and yeah, why? Yes, what is why are we only getting 2 applications in San Diego and we're getting so many in the Bay Area? Again, I don't, kudos to the Bay Area. We need housing everywhere, but I just wonder that, Southern California is pretty, the dots go lower, smaller and smaller as you go down the state. And so I just want us to continue in our evaluation of the guidelines to explore why that is. So anyhow, again, I don't want to rain on this parade, because this is a super exciting day, and I support all of this. It's incredible. But thanks for listening about just elevating some of these issues that I think as we're moving forward, we can pay attention to. Thanks.
Great. Frank.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Flowers to everybody. What a glorious day. I want to align myself with Secretary Ross in at least 2 respects. First, absolutely, if I could shimmy like Secretary Castro Ramirez, I would. No one here would enjoy it but me, but if I could, I would. And secondly, Karen, once again, is right. This is really a testament to the genius of SGC's enabling legislation and the follow-on financing mechanism for SGC programs, the climate investments that are made possible by this state's innovative cap and trade program. Now we see the genius of the legislation and the climate investments coming full circle. We are able now to provide hope, health, and homes to people up and down the state of California. I'll just speak to one of our applicants. In LA, nestled between those glorious citadels of Capitol and downtown, and some of the oldest neighborhoods in LA and Boyle Heights and East LA, is the Skid Row area. And nestled between the Fred Jordan mission, the Union Rescue mission, and the People's Grocery Store is the Downtown Women's Center, which is one of our proud recipients today. The Downtown Women's Center for the last 40 years has been doing absolutely biblical work with women and their families in downtown Los Angeles. And for our climate investments, for a portion of that, to be able to provide hope, health, and homes to women and their children in the downtown Los Angeles area, an experience that will be replicated up and down the state through this investment is absolutely beautiful. And so I want to offer my congratulations to the amazing people behind the Downtown Women's Center in Los Angeles. And I want to congratulate Lynn, your entire staff, Ahmad, and particularly Jessica Lopez and your team. What a labor of love it has been, no doubt, for you to bring this to fruition. Congratulations to you on the amazing work that you have done. And may you always celebrate the contribution, Jessica, that you have made and your team to so many people up and down this state. And finally, I just want to congratulate all of the secretaries and deputy secretaries who have worked so hard to make this happen. Deputy Secretary Jameson, Moises Moreno Rivera, Deputy Secretary Sasha, all of the work that you all have done in support of your secretaries to make sure that this happens in the right way and in a timely way is nothing short of amazing. This is really a beautiful day, Mr. Chair, and it's such a privilege to be with you guys.
No, thank you for those comments, and especially you're also calling out the applicants. I think we don't do that enough because at the end of the day, we put out the guidelines and the performance that we're looking for. The people who really make it happen on the ground are the applicants, including the two from San Diego. But kudos to them because they come up with the solutions and the projects that they are going to implement. So I think credit significantly goes to them as well, both who were lucky enough to be selected, but those who weren't as well. So it is, it takes a village to build a village. So kudos to them. Anyone else from council? Secretary Garcia? Yeah.
Quickly here, thank you. I think most of the positive kudos have been said, but I do just want to acknowledge the staff, and not just for the recommendations on the awards, but really the groundwork that you all laid through the guidelines update. So much of the work that went into really enhancing our building electrification, which you all know is challenging. So kudos to you all for doing that. I'm really excited to see that taking place. And while I join all of my colleagues in being extraordinarily pleased and really happy to see this moving forward, I do just want to note, as Councilmember Capretz was mentioning, I think we still have work to do in our rural communities as well. Excited to see, 3 out of 4 here, but want to see more applications there. And I think we only had 1 tribal applicant. And so want to make sure that we're also really putting our focus on that capacity building, which you all are working so diligently to do as well. So I just want to track that sort of through line between that capacity building work and really making sure that the communities that could stand to benefit from this program the most are getting the opportunity to apply more and more as we're seeing this through. But again, just really happy and pleased to see this moving forward and looking forward to some of the public comment, which hopefully will include some from the applicants.
Great. With that, can we move to public comments?
Yes, we have 2 public comments on this item. 1 virtual and 1 in-person public comment. We'll have in-person public comment first, and I will begin by reading the name of the person signed up and having them approach the podium. Christine Williams, would you approach? You may begin your comment.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the council for the opportunity to give these comments today. My name is Christine Williams. I'm a senior program director with Enterprise Community Partners. I'm also a proud Stocktonian, so love all the Central Valley love in the room today. And Enterprise is a national affordable nonprofit organization. And since the AHSC program's first year, we've been delivering technical assistance to applicant teams across the state. And so in round 7, Enterprise's TA team worked with 76% of those recommended for award today. And in addition to supporting the development of thousands of affordable housing units, we really push our applicant teams to design innovative projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so this year, for the first time, we saw projects include the conversion of diesel locomotives to zero emission on commuter rail lines, establishing brand new bus-only lanes, and seeing applicants make really significant capital investments in climate conscious projects across the state. And so we really think this funding round continues to demonstrate that ASIC applicants are putting forth creative, impressive, and collaborative elements to help achieve California's climate goals. And so on behalf of the ASIC Enterprise team, I'd just like to congratulate everyone being recommended for award today. And then we also just want to highlight some changes that were made in round 7 that we felt had really positive outcomes. particularly the expansion of fundable policy and programmatic options related to anti-displacement. So we really saw significant investment being made statewide into policies and programs that are going to help keep Californians housed. And then we just want to highlight that increasing the program's award limit definitely resulted in substantial, I think, impact, again, for applicants across the board. And so with that, just want to thank you all for your leadership and ongoing partnership in this work. And Enterprise looks forward to collaborating with you to achieve A6 goals and round 8 and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes in-person public comment. We have one virtual public comment on this item. For a virtual commenter, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in the Zoom. You can do this by clicking the raise hand function under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, or by pressing *9 on your phone. Emily Burgueño, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. You may begin your public comment.
How could I introduced myself previously, so I'll skip that portion. I wanted to speak on the San Diego applicants and developments that will be happening. Just wanted to make the comment that these projects do include the protection of cultural and natural resources. Wherever you go throughout San Diego, you will find Kumeyaay heritage and identity. So when these projects are in development, ensuring they have a tribal Native American cultural monitor alongside the archaeologists and geologists that are usually on these jobs. And just wanting to acknowledge the displacement of the Kumeyaay Nation within the city and county of San Diego. We don't have any existence along the coast in San Diego's coastline, which is our homelands. And how can we be inclusive of this, of these opportunities to ensure and to develop, right, some type of land base or housing base for the Kumeyaay Nation within San Diego. And I only speak to this area, you know, I don't want to speak for other areas, but I know in LA, the Tongva people have been displaced and do not have a land base as well, but I can't speak on their experience. But yeah, just like Council Member Garcia, thank you for acknowledging that this would be a great opportunity to build on the partnerships and seeking out what the tribal nations would want to include with these types of opportunities when it comes to affordable housing and sustainable communities. As we predate, we are the original sustainable communities here in California. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Emily. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great, thanks for the public comments. So now we will take a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendations for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Round 7 Award.
I so move.
Garcia.
Have a second?
Second.
Nicole Capretz, second. Roll call.
Motion from Secretary Garcia, second from Nicole Capretz. Chair Acefa?
And I think about it.
Yeah.
Oh. Yes.
Public Member Capretz?
Yes.
Public Member Cardenas?
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Yes.
Secretary Garcia?
Yes.
Secretary Omashakin?
Yes.
Deputy Director Radhakrishna?
Yes.
Secretary Ross?
Yes.
Chancellor Munoz?
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Schwartz?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Great.
Can I make a quick unofficial motion? Some of us have had the immense privilege of visiting some of these sites. And I think we should all pay some of these sites a visit at some point in the near future. That's all.
Yeah, we had that discussion earlier in the agenda, but you're absolutely right. I think that's something that council members over the last couple of years and the governor has been asking us to do that. So definitely. With that, we'll move to item number 7, which is a discussion item on the council priority 2, technical assistance and capacity building update. I would like to invite Lynn one more time and Deputy Director Kiran Kumar to present the item. Then we'll have council discussion followed by public comments. Lynn? Oh.
What a perfect segue to this item, right? I think there's a clear recognition that $757.47 million in investment doesn't happen without deep investment in the capacity of communities to actually realize these complex projects. Oh, even I need to be louder. All right. So good afternoon, Chair, SF, and members of the council. It's my pleasure to bring forward an update on SGC's progress to implement Council Priority 2 and the council's historic resolution on furthering capacity building as a key equity strategy. The update today is going to include both a summary of initiatives, both within and across SGC, as well as a very timely update to the technical assistance guidelines. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, the SGC Council unanimously passed a resolution in early 2020 calling for greater initiatives across the SGC Council to promote and integrate capacity building as a key equity strategy to remove barriers to access and improve equitable outcomes. That resolution could not have been itself more timely, coming just ahead of the administration's $48 billion climate commitment, and now the significant investment by the federal administration to make eligible these kinds of projects in disadvantaged communities. The council at the time of the resolution recognized that in order to truly create a more level playing field and support transformative projects in communities that have historically struggled to catalyze that kind of action, technical assistance, capacity building, and community readiness investment is critical. In the past year, there have been a number of new initiatives to move this work forward, including trainings in partnership with many of your agencies and departments, new TA programs that have actually launched, as well as coordinated efforts across our entities to remove obstacles and barriers to access within funding programs. At SGC, every single one of the programs that we administer or oversee has incorporated a focus on capacity this year as a result of this resolution. Next slide, please. So this slide is comprehensive and includes quite a number of different ways in which SGC programs have worked to lower barriers to entry, support upstream readiness, and connect to federal funding, all while focusing on achieving successful project implementation. We can bring the money, but we also want to make sure that the projects are implemented in a successful and equitable way. And so that's what these initiatives have focused on. I think what all of this amounts to collectively is this growing recognition that in order for the state to achieve our own equity goals, our own access to opportunity, as well as rapid progress towards carbon neutrality, as well as the federal Justice 40 initiatives, a continued focus on community readiness and capacity building is absolutely critical. So with that quick intro, I wanted to turn it over to my colleague, Ina Lupin, who's the program manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity team, to talk through some of those more specific updates.
Great. Thank you, Kieran. Good afternoon, Chair Sefa and council members. As Kieran mentioned, I am the program manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity program, and I'm really excited to be able to give an overview of 3 exciting initiatives that our team has been working on this summer. So we can go to the next slide, please. I will be talking about the development of our tribal capacity building program, the round 2 of our BOOST program, and also an update to the technical assistance guidelines that we have actually renamed the Technical Assistance Toolkit. I will speak about that a little bit more in a moment. But I'll start with talking about the Tribal Capacity Building Pilot Program, which is the CASE team's newest program. It will provide funding and tailored technical assistance to California Native American tribes with the goal of assisting them in developing long-term capacity to secure funding and implement tribal-led climate solutions. SGC developed this pilot based on consistent feedback that we have heard from tribes over the years,
that their unique sovereign status and historical relationship with the state of California necessitates a capacity building program that's really tailored to their specific needs. As you can see in this graphic, the program will offer a wide variety of services and support to participating tribes. We plan to really follow tribes' lead in terms of determining which services will be most helpful to meet their climate-related needs and priorities. So go to the next slide. Along with my colleague Nancy Chang, we developed a robust engagement process to inform this program and released a request for information, which includes draft grant guidelines and questions to inform the technical assistance provider solicitation for the program. In addition to the RFI, we also requested formal tribal consultation, mailing 184 letters to tribes on the California Native American Heritage Commission list. As a part of this engagement effort, we also held 6 workshops with over 130 registrants, held 18 key informant interviews, presented at 3 in-person events. So really did a lot of engagement and outreach. We plan on taking this input into consideration into our final guidelines that we'll be bringing to council for approval in October. So we can go to the next slide, please. So the next initiative I would love to update the council on is round 2 of the BOOST program, which provides tailored technical assistance to help under-resourced local governments meet their climate, equity, and resilience goals. The council may remember that we had a highly successful pilot round of this program in 2019 and 2020, and I'm really happy to share that round 2 of the program was also a great success. We selected 7 cities through a competitive process in fall 2021 who demonstrated a commitment to achieving climate and equity related goals, but who needed additional capacity to be able to achieve those priorities. Those cities include Barstow, La Puente, Maywood, McFarland, Needles, Rialto, and South San Francisco. We also worked with an all-star team to be able to kick off round 2. Our implementation partners include the Institute for Local Government, Farallon Strategies, the California Coalition for Rural Housing, and Climate Resolve. And we really want to thank those partners for their hard work and dedication to achieving meaningful outcomes for the communities that participated. Next slide, please. So we had a lot of really impressive outcomes of round 2 of the program, which include helping BOOST participants apply for 27 grants and securing more than $23 million in grant funding, providing in-depth public engagement training for 32 staff members, planning and facilitating 20 community conversations and engagement events. And this round, we really had a very critical focus on helping communities obtain and maintain compliance with state mandates. We supported the development of a housing element, an environmental justice element, a safety element, and we helped the city of Needles to meet their pro-housing designation, which is a really big deal. We will soon be releasing a final report and a press release that will outline these and many other meaningful outcomes that we had for this program. Go to the next slide, please. And so lastly, we're really excited to announce that we will soon be launching an update to the technical assistance guidelines, which we developed in 2020. As some of you may know, Senate Bill 1072 called SGC to create this resource out of a growing recognition of the importance of technical assistance and the need to guide agencies around how to offer impactful assistance to communities. To develop this guidance, SGC worked with a work group of 22 experts in technical assistance and capacity building across 13 different agencies, including all of the agencies that are represented on this council. They offered really meaningful guidance to SGC as we drafted the first version of this tool. And so we're really excited to be able to have an update. The resource was originally called Technical Assistance Guidelines for State Agencies, but we realized after releasing the first version of this resource that it's been utilized by a really broad range of funders, from federal agencies to philanthropy. And we really wanted to kind of remove that explicit focus on state agencies to have a broader focus. We are also recognizing that this document has become a really interactive web-based tool, and we felt that calling it the Technical Assistance Toolkit more accurately represents the breadth of resources that it offers. So next slide, please. So before I dive into the content, I really wanted to take a step back and talk about why we felt this was important to update right now. First, we really hear from communities every single day that they need technical assistance and capacity building, and that high quality assistance really makes a difference in helping them plan for and implement climate projects. We hope that this toolkit will help ensure that the TA that they receive is as high quality as possible. Secondly, we're not the only ones who are getting this message from communities. State agencies and federal agencies are hearing the same thing, and they're really stepping up to be offering more and more technical assistance to communities. But it's a really new process for a lot of agencies. And so we have been hearing frequent requests from colleagues across state government for support in setting up their technical assistance programs. And we really wanted to make sure that we could provide the most beneficial support as possible. Lastly, this update is coming at a really timely moment, as Kieran mentioned, when there are historic levels of funding coming down from the state and federal levels. So doubling down on technical assistance right now is very important to ensure that these dollars won't bypass the communities that need it the most. Next slide, please. So in terms of the updates that we did make, we worked with a number of state agencies that are represented on the Health and All Policies Task Force and other interagency work groups to gather input into what changes we could make to ensure that the toolkit is as user-friendly and useful as possible. We added 7 new sections, 5 new case studies, a number of new checklists, templates, and samples, and we also added a more explicit emphasis on racial equity. We think this update is going to make the TA Toolkit an even more useful resource for staff across all of your agencies and for other funders who would like to support California communities. So next, following Matt's reminder and public comment, we would like to pass it over to Chair Sefa. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks Ina and Kieran. Great overview. That we will open it up to council discussion. You've teed up questions for the council. There are a couple of questions for this, to guide our discussion. The first is, how are your entities incorporating a focus on capacity building with your efforts? And then with that, how can the technical assistance guidelines support those efforts? And then the second question is, given Governor Gavin Newsom's direction to focus implementation of state and federal resources across California, what are ways that the state can continue to lead and innovate to support community readiness? Maybe you could start with the first one, and I'll be happy to start. So how at OPR we have sort of a number of programs, grant programs, and one of them that is pretty robust and up and going is the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program. They have 2 interrelated grant programs, one for adaptation and one for resiliency. And the structure is using a third party to actually provide the technical assistance that staff prioritize underrepresented or under-resourced communities, and including, to Secretary Ross's points that she makes, often unincorporated and rural communities as well, those who are in need of technical assistance, as well as focusing on California tribal communities. So that program, both for the adaptation and resiliency, one looks for a way to integrate the two, and then second, really target that where the need is the most. And Ina pointed out that we hear a lot about that. In terms of how can that, this support that program, I think one of the most critical things for state governments to do now is to really understand how all of our different programs and work are interrelated. I was glad to see in your report, there's 13 agencies programs that are out there, and this team is looking at that. How do we connect the dots so that the support of the capacity building or technical assistance that we give have more impact in communities being able to either, conduct their application in the most efficient way and know, where to connect the dots with admit as a state government, we have significant amount of silos, including how well we work with this different agencies represented here, but we still have sort of a structure of silos. So I think there's a long way that I think capacity building and guidelines could go in sort of helping connect the dots. And I know the SGC team already does that in, working with the FIBS assessments, part of the ICAR program, and just looking at how, a lot of the work that we do is for the same goal, and just, I think we facilitate connecting the dots. So those are the two comments that I would make in terms of first. Garcia.
Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on this. And again, thanks for the work and thoughtfulness from the team that's really gone into this over the past several years. Just really quickly, I just want to flag a few things that we have at Cal EPA sort of in response to the first question, and then a thought on the second. As many of you know, we have a long-standing environmental justice small grants program that has now grown to a more significant action grants program. And that program was really born out of a desire and a need for small community-based organizations to have some baseline capacity support to engage in our decision-making processes. And that has always been challenging for us to fund at the state level. But, the creation of that program has shown us that we can be flexible in how we use discretionary state dollars and want to be able to do so in order to support some of that seed money that so many organizations need, including organizations that went on to apply for successful TCC grants and the like, folks like Pacoima Beautiful and Watts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have no need to question the utility of those discretionary dollars for some of our community-based organizations. And I hope that we can continue to fund those smaller organizations and at that scale. Now, on the infrastructure side within Cal EPA, I also think we've learned quite a bit from how we've even gone about funding new drinking water systems and safe, clean, and affordable drinking water for so many communities. As you all know, in our most under-resourced communities, ensuring that we're partnering with other community-based organizations and technical assistance providers outside of government is also critical. I don't need to explain that to you, staff at SGC. You all know that very well. We work with many of the same partners, enterprise community partners, and several others that are really playing that critical role. So I just want to give a nod to those technical assistance providers that exist outside of government and how key it is to be able to grant and support them to do the great work that they do statewide. And so I hope we can see that continue on. And then in terms of just education and information dissemination that contributes to so much more transparency, particularly for those of us that are operating in the regulatory space. And here we've also seen a lot of really wonderful progress and want to continue to move the needle here too through programs like AB 617 that really put forward dollars for not only the building of community steering committees to work with local governments, but also hard infrastructure and monitoring, ensuring that we understand the air pollution impacts that are affecting communities. So that feeds into the programs that you all are administering on the side of grant making and implementation. And so that's also been really critical. So I say all of that to say, there's such a deep interconnected web between all of these efforts and really critical to our ability to continue to provide this capacity building and ensure that our programs are successful as this ongoing technical assistance work. So really just pleased to see it growing in that respect. And then I think in terms of where we need to go to make sure that now the larger scale investments are successful as well. And this may seem a little granular or small scale, but I think it continues to be really important, is ensuring that we are supporting families and residents to engage where needed, but also consolidating our efforts. There's a lot of focus in the technical assistance realm and how do we provide more assistance at the grassroots level, and that remains very important. But I also think we need to be able to streamline our own processes, coordinate across government ourselves, not frankly waste community residents' time going to 17 different meetings when we could actually consolidate those meetings into one. So I want to make sure that we're also in consistent communication about that. And just put a plug there. And again, really happy for this body of work, and look forward to hearing more from my interagency colleagues.
A hand from Secretary Ross.
So I want to start where Secretary Garcia ended. Here on how we can work across agencies to make life easier for all of the groups we are finding ourselves individually reaching out to. I think about that in so many different levels with the number of public workshops and roundtables and meetings we have around some of our specific issues. But part of the technical assistance also needs to be from agencies like yours, Secretary Garcia, and OPR, where people have been doing this kind of local community engagement, especially on the environmental justice issues where you have more experience, is helping us. We need technical assistance to make sure that we're being effective, that we're listening to all the voices, and that we're engaging the most appropriate way for the communities that we know we need to reach and have those kinds of dialogues with. So I wanted to add that to your closing comments. I also have to comment that the first time we said we wanted to provide technical assistance, it was fairly new a number of years back, and it was SGC that provided initial funding to us as a pilot to be able to bring on board through the University of California Ag Extension Service to bring on 10 community educators on climate smart agriculture. We started that program because we knew that we were not reaching all of the small farms or farmers where English is not their first language. We wanted to make sure they knew about the program, but in doing that, we also learned a lot about just giving them the information about what those practices were, how they could adopt them, what the benefits could be for them, and then providing them support throughout the entire grant program, because all grants come with some sort of progress reporting, and there's a need throughout that entire process to make sure we're doing that. That has grown from that initial $1 million. We've been able to renew those contracts with the university several times. And we're new to the grant making game. We haven't been in it even 10 years. And we put over $12.5 million into community-based organizations, nonprofit groups. And probably the most exciting opportunity to scale up for us has been our memorandum of understanding with other agencies, including the University of California Ag and Natural Resources, the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is part of USDA. This is going to be increasingly important because as some of our dollars may be plateauing, they have several $100 million additional dollars to bring to the climate smart ag space, which is going to be critical to helping us achieve our climate goals. So that's been a very important opportunity for us. And we feel that this investment in technical assistance is building up new infrastructure throughout our rural communities that will be there to assist growers with compliance issues that are especially burdensome for many of our smaller farmers, and that it's an investment for long-term, even when there aren't grant dollars. We're putting in the infrastructure, the outreach, the training, and the education to really improve our practices and make sure that every farmer, every acre has access to the kinds of programs that will help them do better and be successful. So technical assistance is the name of the game. And why more states aren't doing this, I don't know, but hopefully they'll take a page out of our lesson book. Thank you.
Else, Deputy Director Radhakrishna. On, you're first.
All right. Well, Health and Human Services is really excited about this updated toolkit. It's a really important mechanism to operationalize equity. Our staff participated in the early work groups, and we really appreciated the thoughtful process of all the input that you gathered. At our agency, we do fund a lot of non-competitive allocations delivered directly to under-resourced communities that don't necessarily require applications. So we really appreciate that this update includes a lot of checklists and templates and examples, so people don't have to reinvent the wheel around planning and the policy implementation, including best practices. One that's included comes from our our Department of Public Health, which is the California Reducing Disparities Project, where we funded 35 community-based organizations and the technical advisors and evaluations groups that are experts in those areas outside of government for 5 priority populations. And we're really pleased to see those scopes of work included as examples. A couple example ideas to perhaps further the impact of this toolkit. The first one Secretary Ross mentioned earlier, which is the train the trainer notion. A toolkit's no good if it sits on the shelf with the toolbox, but getting actually opened up and used to have that further deeper reach is so important. And so using it to support rural and unincorporated areas to have that local and regional expertise in the TA of applying all that's in the toolkit is so important. You almost think of hot spotting disadvantaged communities. Well, you could think backwards about cold spotting across the state. Where have funds not yet penetrated over the various rounds? And how do we fund the TA providers in those regions so we get more representativeness of applications moving forward? That will help level the playing field. A second idea really relates to the excellent tribal capacity building report that you gave. So thanks for that. Really exciting to see that team and the grant guidelines get off the ground. I recently learned that tribes in other jurisdictions, in order to qualify for FEMA reimbursement, have a long list of requirements, including a local hazard mitigation plan. That can take 18 months to develop and requires a lot of technical assistance. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I anticipate in the next 18 months, we will see more disasters since it's all year, all season. So even if we just look at the atmospheric rivers from earlier this year, there were many entities that could not qualify for FEMA reimbursement because many things, hopefully, that are on your checklist weren't in place. Everything from some minutia like a taxpayer identification number to a robust local hazard mitigation plan. So what we'd like to see is almost reverse engineering, look at who didn't qualify and why, and how can we ensure that they will be able to receive new funds and get reimbursed for climate-related disasters. So that gets really into the details of how many of the 109 federally recognized tribes are ready to receive and ready to be reimbursed. What about the unrecognized tribes? What are the strategies to do so, and other jurisdictions as well? So we think that would create further reach of this great toolkit. And the last comment, public member Capretz referenced the challenge of small organizations. And so we just wanted to elevate that our agency's also been getting a lot of feedback around the challenge of those small grassroots micro organizations that may not even have 501c3 status, and the importance of sustainable, long-term, unrestricted funds for their organizational growth. Pollinating those organizations across the state will be really important. And really, they're asking not for competing in applications, but some of those indicator and data-driven reimbursements for need. Of course, simplifying the application process and shifting away from the reimbursement-only model, which we know SGC has been an innovator in piloting advanced pay. So overall, bravo, and we hope that this toolkit will really help level the playing field and help promote equity. Great job.
Deputy Secretary Kerrigan.
Thank you, Chair. I really have enjoyed the comments so far, so I'll try not to be duplicative, but just lift up some of the things. And thank you so much for the staff work and for the interagency work that you led on this. The number of departments that you engaged to inform this update is really impressive, and the way that you've brought the whole state along with you in this conversation is helpful, including our legislative partners, as they've continued to see the value and opportunity for capacity building and ways that we've intentionally made space within many state programs. It's behind the scenes work that's not celebrated. And so Secretary Garcia also did a great job of noting some of the nuances here. State team access to discretionary funding, or the lack of access, sometimes limits our ability. And so how do we continue to be creative in deploying these strategies, even if funding is not meant for this at the face? And so finding those connections between, as others have pointed out, seems valuable. And so I look forward to getting deeper into the toolkit to see if we're covering that, or what other TA may be needed for state teams. How do we continue to find those opportunities? Third, I wanted to build on your comments about the federal component. At the Department of Housing and Community Development, the department is passing through funds on behalf of housing and urban development to jurisdictions that are smaller than to qualify for their own disbursements. So when we're navigating federal compliance, aside from tax ID numbers and disasters, which riles me up in a very special way, but to say that, we're navigating federal compliance. And so how do we find those spaces between, again, where we're meeting federal partners where they're at, and also acknowledging the community needs so that we're not creating undue barriers in program administration and other things like that stand in the way of capacity building and community engagement. One of the things that I'd offer is, and with all of our council members, we all have regional administrators from our federal partners. And so continuing to build relationships there to highlight some of this work and show how we're making this happen and to see where we can meet them in the middle. And so that will look different for Secretary Ross's team than it does for our team and our partners at HUD. But I think that could be something that the council discusses and consider strategies to advance our administration's agenda in this regard. And then last, just not necessarily looking for a response, but just want to name that, in programs like Home Key at HCD, where we've been happy to lean into technical assistance, even if not outright capacity building in ways that we're not always able to in competitive housing finance programs. We're continuing to explore how to do that better. So there is a tribal specific NOFA. This is the first time that we're doing that. And I just want to pose for future consideration if there's specific things that we need to attend to in a future revision of the toolkit to focus on the government to government relationship and specific capacity building opportunities that the state can extend to tribes. And that seems worthwhile for all of us to kind of reflect on our tribal programs that we're working through and to figure out what we can do better in the future. Thanks.
Thank you both. Great comments, especially on government to government as we're trying to navigate through that process and with our focus. And then obviously the federal component is really critical as well. Really appreciate those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just want to commend the director and our staff again on this toolkit. The timeliness of it is very apropos. There are so many funding pots, as we all know, funding opportunities that are coming down from the federal government, from IIJA, IRA, CHIPS Act, on and on and on, federal funding to the tunes of billions and billions, and also on the state side. I think sometimes we take for granted the fact that there's so many communities that just don't have the capacity or ability to be able to seek this funding. Council member mentioned, and I don't know if it's a capacity issue, I mentioned it. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, and in Southern California, the lack of applicants there. There could be some there that want to, but they just like, how do we even begin to go after this? So just want to commend you for the timeliness of it. I think it'll be very useful. One of the ways that potentially will be impactful on the transportation side, if you will, is Caltrans just appointed some Caltrans engagement coordinators. They're in the process, at least, CECs. Some people here may know Caltrans is actually the largest public-facing organization, state organization in the entire state. The largest state organization is corrections. That's a whole nother discussion. Has 60,000 people, but Caltrans has 23,000 people almost. So you think 23,000 people, they should be fine with all the engagement that's necessary. But sometimes we could always do better. I promise you. I know that for a fact that we can do better. So these CECs that Darwin from our team has mentioned to me, I think is one of the avenues as we hire those 12 people in 12 different districts of Caltrans. This is a toolkit that I think could be useful for them as they look to improve their engagement with community stakeholders. And just one last other quick item is pretty soon this fall, we'll be rolling out the Reconnecting Communities program. I'm sure you all are very familiar with that. It's a $150 million program to help the state identify or improve communities that have been bifurcated by highways. We all know more than ever, what this has meant to communities economically, socially, environmentally, health-wise, equity-wise. So really looking forward to us being able to roll out this program with Caltrans at the lead, and I'm sure we'll be coordinating with you. But there's a handbook that's been developed by the team, this Reconnecting Communities team, and they are going to be sharing this handbook more and more with communities so they can seek funding from. They'll understand how to seek funding and partner with the state as we roll out this $150 million program. So again, timeliness of this is right on spot because I think communities more and more will be in need of ways to access all the funding, $15 billion just in state funding alone from Governor Newsom on the transportation side. And that's not even the federal money and all discretionary competitive. So exciting time, but we still need more work to do to get communities access to these funds. So thank you to your team. Chair.
Yeah, I do echo the timeliness of this, especially with the incredible unprecedented resources that are coming from the federal as well as the state program. On your question around innovation, I think on the second question about how do we, make state, implement state and federal resources across California more effective. The only thing I can think about is one of the challenges communities face often are, even when I go through the website, there's so many different places to apply. Even in our own office, there's just so many grants. And what New York State has done, all applications are single application for all grant funding programs. Single application. They implemented this thing called CFA, Consolidated Funding Application. New York State is pretty big. What is the version of that for us? I'm not saying that let's go out and explore that, but there's no reason why we can't either. So, application, the maze of applications in our.
Is that an order from you, Mr. Chair?
Yes. Request. Is anyone, could we put it on the agenda for a vote? But I'm just putting it out there. It is just fascinating that they're able to do that. And anyways, anyone else? No. So we will open it up to public comments.
We have 2 virtual public comments on this item and 1 in-person public comment. We'll begin with in-person first. I'll begin the public comment period by reading the names of the individuals signed up for public comment on this item, which is item 7 on the agenda. Erica Manuel, would you approach the podium, please? You may begin when you're ready.
Great, thank you. How's the sound? Perfect. Well, good afternoon. Hello. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Institute for Local Government, and it is really my privilege to be here and speak on behalf of the BOOST program, which we had the privilege of supporting for the last few years. It's a really innovative program, and it's been a really successful program. And with ILG, when people ask me what we do, I try to tell them that we're this nonprofit that works with local governments of all sizes. We try to help them do their job on the ground a little bit better. We try to make sure that the policies that maybe get agreed upon in the Capitol or in DC actually get implemented well in the neighborhood level and with the people. And so that's why I think BOOST has been so important. And I'm so grateful to the SGC team and certainly to this board for their support of this program. We worked with so many small, urban, rural communities that didn't have the capacity, right? They just didn't have even the capacity to manage sometimes the day-to-day operations, let alone think about climate or equity goals, right? They had to deal with the fire on the ground, literally or figuratively, and didn't have the time to also maybe just take advantage of that grant opportunity. And it's really, really important that when we think about, and I love this slide that was up there, we did help write grants and we did help identify projects, but what you don't see on that spreadsheet is the relationships that were built, the way we trained some of the trainers, some of those key elements tied to operational improvements and leadership development and collaboration, and some of those foundational skills that are really pivotal for some of these communities that are going to make long-term dividends and real climate equity and resilience. And I think the power of Boost, as you've heard, with all of your TA programs, is that flexible technical assistance. And it's so important, it's so critical, and we're so grateful for it. And as you look forward and continue to do this work and support these kinds of projects, I hope that you will also continue to kind of really think through how we can build that flexible, collaborative technical assistance, and think about those communities that don't have shovel-ready projects, that don't have somebody ready just yet, but with a little help, they can do it. And we've been happy and grateful to be able to provide that support. I want to thank our team, and I want to thank the SGC team in particular, Lynn, Ina, Emily, Kieran, and others, as well as the larger project team, which we mentioned. And I'll just close by saying that Boost was a really special program, and it gave a voice to the sometimes kind of forgotten and smaller communities and local governments in particular, which are a really critical part of this ecosystem when you're looking at climate action. So thank you. And if you can expand this program, we would love to see Boost Round 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
For
Is it appropriate to comment on a public comment from up here?
you can engage with public comment. I would suggest doing so maybe after all the public comments been received. For our virtual public comment, when you hear your name, please raise your hand on the Zoom. Our first virtual public comment comes from Christina Fernandez. If you could raise your hand on the Zoom. Christina, are you with us?
Yes, hi, can you hear me okay?
We can. You may begin your public comment.
Great. Good afternoon, Council Chair Shefa and council members. My name is Christina Fernandez, and I am the Deputy City Manager and Chief Sustainability Officer here at the City of South San Francisco. The city just wishes to express our gratitude and support for the Boost program. We're a small city, but we're very proudly diverse. 80% of our households identify as households of color, and approximately 60% of our residents speak a language other than English at home. We are considered an equity priority community with concentrations of low income, households of color. Boost provided technical assistance and staff capacity when we just didn't have it. They researched numerous grants, connected us with relevant agencies and stakeholders, and went above and beyond to ensure that the city made strategic moves in advancing our recently adopted climate action plan. ILG was instrumental in securing $2.4 million in Clean California grant funding for our Centennial Way Trail project. And this will transform one of our most underserved neighborhoods by providing access to trails, outdoor education areas, and other amenities. This also serves a Title I school and the Boys and Girls Club nearby. Erica touched on it, but she's 100% correct in that we were able to build really strong relationships, authentic relationships with a lot of our informal CBOs that aren't necessarily, formalized 501c3s. ILG and the Boost team helped us, do a community partner meeting, and we were able to understand their unique needs of each group and offer them resources. And so with ILG's training on public engagement, we now have the tools to continue that public engagement with our community. And for that, we're extremely grateful. We would just like to express our gratitude to ILG and to the council for their support of this program. Thank you for all that you do to advance climate and equity goals. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. Our next commenter is Rainey Torrance. Rainey, are you with us? Rainey, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Rainey Torrance, and I'm with the City of Needles. I am here to speak on behalf of the Boost program. The city applied for the Boost program at a critical time for the City of Needles. The city was desperate to update its general plan, address aging infrastructure, and increase housing. There was no funds available and no staff capable of finding funding opportunities. Only through the Boost program was the City of Needles able to achieve many successes. The city received technical assistance that would not have otherwise been received other than through Boost. The City of Needles is rural, isolated, and disadvantaged. Only through Boost was the City of Needles better be able to be heard across the state, which is a big accomplishment for us way out here towards the Arizona border. The City of Needles, through the Boost program, is better equipped and qualified to continue to seek funding going forward. On behalf of the City of Needles, we want to recognize the great Boost staff that they have at ILG, California for Coalition for Rural Housing, even your own SGC staff. They were personable, they cared about our communities, and they gave everything into all tasks, whether they were big or small. We hope you, as the board, continue this type of TA for rural and disadvantaged communities similar to the City of Needles. It's important, it plays a critical role, and it should be available for other jurisdictions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great, thank you for those comments. Councilmember Cardenas, did you have?
Mr. Chair, thanks very much. I congratulate the staff for partnering with the Institute for Local Government. You're the Institute for Local Government. I first became acquainted with your organization's work a few years ago when I was on the Fair Political Practices Commission. Good staff over there, but your write-ups on how to comply with the Fair Political Practices Act of 1974 is the best I've ever seen. And the other information that you provide to local governments and to the public, whoever writes your copy is a terrific draftsperson, because you are able to make legalese and government speak accessible and understandable. And so for us to be partnering together is just another indication that our staff knows exactly what they're doing.
Great. With that, we'll move to item number 8, which is a discussion item as well. This is on the SGC's intra-agency racial equity updates. I'd like to invite Kieran to present the item. Then we'll have council discussion followed by public comments.
Thank you. So as our esteemed panel is getting seated at the table, I just wanted to provide a little bit of additional background on this item. I think if so much of this work is driven by capacity building and readiness as kind of one side of the coin, I would say the other side of that coin is our work internally to operationalize equity, and specifically racial equity. So I'm excited to bring forward this item as an update on the council's work to advance racial equity. As a reminder, this is an update that is a commitment from the council to use these public meeting spaces twice a year to provide transparency and accountability around how the state is really operationalizing and moving forward racial equity. Today's item is going to include a few updates, followed by a really compelling panel of practitioners who are leading efforts within their organizations, kind of on this spectrum from normalizing this topic of racial equity to then operationalizing strategies and initiatives to really move this work forward. The discussion is also going to specifically focus on new policy infrastructure within the state government, including the Governor's Executive Order N1622, and how that policy infrastructure is helping to catalyze further action around equity. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to share 2 really brief updates with you on some key interagency updates. First, the Health and All Policies Task Force has continued to prioritize a focus on racial equity and convenes nearly 40 different state entities on a quarterly basis to further these efforts around embedding equity across all functions within agencies and entities. This year's foci have included a focus on fostering racial equity practices, centering equity in community engagement and grant making, and then also addressing gaps in our equity data infrastructure. And we'll talk about a little bit of those pieces in our panel. Excitingly, this model is continuing to gain traction across the country and even internationally. Excitingly, SGC's program manager will be actually traveling to Finland to help inform the World Health Organization on the state's health and all policies initiatives. Second is the pretty incredible Capital Collaborative on Racial Equity, or CORE, that is led by the Public Health Institute State of Equity team. CORE is a training, capacity building, and coaching program that helps to build internal competency of state agencies to further racial equity. The 2022-23 cohort just closed, and there's significant demand for an additional cohort moving forward. Additionally, this year included the launch of a transformative leadership cohort centered on leaders specifically within state government and across communities. And then also this work additionally is really gaining traction nationally as a model for how state government can really center and facilitate work around racial equity. Next slide, please. Really quickly, wanted to just share that SGC has continued to maintain the Racial Equity Resource Hub as this tool within state government to support initiatives internally. Again, the idea is that we don't need to be recreating the wheel where folks have figured this out. They've developed templates, they've developed tools that will help us move this work faster. Additionally, the Racial Equity Resource Hub has been this great opportunity to hear from our agency partners around work to promote racial equity, and look out soon for a blog post from Council Member Secretary Ross on CDFA's pretty incredible work around racial equity. And then finally, SGC's strategic plan that this council adopted at our last council meeting. Just wanted to reiterate again that that document really centers a focus on equity, including throughout a commitment around racial equity strategies. And of course, that document was developed in partnership with all of your agencies and departments. And so really leaning into those opportunities for interagency coordination. All right, next slide. Okay, finally, and maybe the meat of this update is that it is really centered around all of the work of the agencies on this dais. The racial equity staff report includes an appendix that includes 35 pages of numerated line item updates from each of your agencies, an incredible summary and report of work that's happened over this last year to really operationalize racial equity. Of course, I can't go through every single one of those updates, but I wanted to share some key themes that have emerged. First, we are seeing new initiatives to develop racial equity action plans or embed equity within strategic plans. We are seeing new grant programs, policy initiatives, technical assistance to really target historically marginalized communities, including tribes. And then finally, a lot of new internal initiatives, including bringing on leadership positions focused on racial equity, environmental justice, new trainings, ongoing workshops, really the ongoing work internally to make this work sustainable. All right, last slide. Cool, okay. So with that, I wanted to pass it over to our Health and Equity Program Manager, Jasmine Garcia Delgadillo, to introduce our incredible panel of practitioners. For council members who were here at our last update, you'll remember that we had a panel of practitioners that really helped elevate the work that's happening within our state agencies, as well as the opportunities for further support of this work. So Jasmine, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And it is my great pleasure to welcome our Racial Equity Practitioners panel. We have three incredible leaders who are working to advance racial equity within their departments and across the state of California. Thank you. First off, we have Ugo Eke-Simmons. She is a staff air pollution specialist in the executive office at the California Air Resources Board, working as CARB's subject matter expert on equity for internal operations. Ugo joined the department in 2010, became an air resources engineer, and then spent many years building a strong background in technical and policy work. In her current role, she serves as a lead on all internal equity policy and is involved in multiple equity efforts across CARB and the California Environmental Protection Agency, or Cal EPA. She is a co-chair on CARB's Diversity and Racial Equity Task Force, lead coordinator and principal trainer in the Advancing Racial Equity at Cal EPA curriculum, and a leading member of the Cal EPA Racial Equity team. And there's so much more to share about her work there. Next, we have Eugene Hilsman, who is the Deputy Director of Equity and Inclusion for the California Department of Cannabis Control. As a doctoral candidate at Princeton, Eugene's dissertation focused on an examination of America's cannabis policy, which took seriously the impact of the war on drugs on disadvantaged communities. After finishing his doctoral work, he moved to California to join the Office of Cannabis as Deputy Director in San Francisco. And in July 2021, he was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom, to be Deputy Director of Equity and Inclusion for California's Department of Cannabis Control. Welcome, Eugene. And then we have Greg Gerhard, who is the Deputy Director at the California State Water Resources Control Board for Information Management and Analysis, and has led that amazing team of scientists, engineers, and analysts for 7 years now. In his 30 years at this organization, Greg has worked in many different program areas, including stormwater, wetlands, watershed management, enforcement, and various projects projects dedicated to organizational development, including his current role, helping lead the organization to advance racial equity. So we're really excited to have them join us today. The theme of our panel is moving from normalizing to operationalizing racial equity. We understand that state agencies and departments are at different stages of their racial equity work, and we hope that this panel will help highlight existing and exciting racial equity efforts and inspire additional opportunities to further the advancement of racial equity work in California. So I will turn it over to the panelists to briefly share a bit about their work and what brings them to the racial equity space, and then initiate the panel discussion. After our panel discussion, I will turn it over to council to facilitate a conversation with the panel as well. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Hugo, to share a bit about your work.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. So again, Ugo Eke Simmons, subject matter expert on equity for internal operations at CARB. And so really what that means, and being the lead on equity, internal equity policy for CARB, is really has to do with CARB's workforce and internal operations, right? Or internal facing work, and building staff capacity and ability to be able to do this work. Right. Internal equity so there are two pieces of internal equity. So there's one, which is identifying and addressing barriers to equity within our own organization, right? So breaking those down as we move forward. And then also embedding equity in CARB's programmatic work. And that second piece there has a lot of overlap with our external facing equity efforts, right? That really inform like how we interact with the public and things like that. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight the reason why we differentiate between internal and external equity is they're both very important. But for our staff internally, it's very important to understand the distinction, because what we do internally and are able to work on internally is we can't authentically exude that externally until we're able to do it within, right? And so that's kind of why we differentiate there. But it's definitely a both and approach, right? They go hand in hand. Jasmine mentioned some other things. So I'm CARB's DEIB, so Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Training Coordinator. I also, she mentioned, lead the training capacity building subteam of CalEPA's racial equity team. I'm also coordinating CARB's implementation of Governor Newsom's executive order on embedding equity in state government. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then, Jasmine mentioned I'm an engineer by training, right? I have a bachelor's degree in civil and environmental engineering and a master's degree in civil engineering. And the bulk of my career at CARB has been spent as an air resources engineer, right? Working on our technical programmatic side. What brought me to this space is I'm very passionate about racial equity work and have done tons of formal and informal advocacy work outside the workspace for many, many years. And in 2020, right, as we went through that racial reckoning that we went through, that we're still continuing to go through, right after the murder of George Floyd and countless other Black and Brown people, we really started to talk about race in the workplace. And so that's when, in summer of 2020, our Diversity and Racial Equity Task Force was formed. I joined, and then it's almost kind of like the rest is history from there. A year after that, I became a racial equity trainer with our Advancing Racial Equity at CalEPA curriculum. I became a co-chair on that task force. And then when the opportunity arose for me to really step into working on equity full-time at CARB, I jumped at it. And so here I am. So.
Sure. Good afternoon. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Equity and Inclusion Division, responsible for developing it. Outreach efforts and administration. promising practices and policies outcomes for thank you. That's better. Appreciate it. Happy to kind of describe some of the comments that I made as a part of my remarks, but overall, really responsible for doing development, implementation, administration around the department's equity initiatives. I think one of the things that's really critical about equity in the cannabis space is that it was a really important and central part of the conversation around cannabis legalization. And so a lot of regulatory agencies have had the benefit of having equity be a part of the conversation from the beginning. So as we're thinking about implementing regulations, developing structures, it's really been a central part of the conversation, and stakeholders have an expectation that it's a central part of the conversation. And so that's really what brought me to the work, kind of having the opportunity to participate in a very new area for cannabis regulation, although cannabis consumption in the state of California is not new, right? A lot of the regulations and legalization part of the conversation is. And so coming from a space in which I was working on policy and especially from an academic perspective, it was really an opportunity to kind of get my hands dirty, right? And do some of the implementation around some of this work, which has certainly had a lot of challenges, but really excited about the opportunity to support individuals and communities that have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs.
I'm Greg Gearhart. It's a tremendous honor to be able to speak to you all as council members, both deep respect for your work collectively and individually to help support and advance this work. So I want to thank you for that. I got involved in this work, as you might have heard in my intro. I've been at the Water Board for 30 years. The Water Board has created an incredible place for me and my colleagues to develop both the capacity of our state agency, but really also to change the way that water and the communities intersect over time. So having watched environmental justice and climate activism and other things and been involved in those both internally and externally, in 2019, I was presented an opportunity, thanks to CORE, to join the Capital Cohort and learn the work of advancing racial equity using sort of this network model of change. So this is like now deeply embedded 4 years later in the Water Board's culture. And I'm here as one representative of leadership, but I'm supported and surrounded by lots of amazing leaders of the Water Board. I want to name Nefertiri Cooley and Adriana Renteria in particular. I wouldn't be here without their support, and we wouldn't be where we are without the distributed leadership model that the Water Board has really taken. So it's with great pride and honor that I'm part of this, and I hope to answer some questions about what you think we're doing with the Water Board, but it's really part of my model and message is this is a network, and the capacity building is not happening in silos. And I'm here to sort of represent that because I work with teams across Cal EPA, I work with teams across the state on developing capacity around racial equity, and it's extremely powerful work that needs to be continued to support.
Thank you so much. And for those who may not be familiar, CORE is the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, which provides capacity building on racial equity for state practitioners. Thank you all so much. We'll start off with the first question, which is, given the recent Executive Order N1622, which directs state agencies to take critical actions on equity and other statewide initiatives, how are you continuing to center racial equity within your work? And I'll allow whoever wants to get started to jump in first.
I can get started. So I think the executive order really accelerated the intentionality of some of the work that was already happening. As I mentioned, cannabis equity had already been a really central part of the conversation in thinking about regulations and the development of policies to really support individuals and communities that have been negatively impacted. But it created both community, right? So an opportunity to talk to other state agencies and departments that were really engaged in the work. And so it really brought together a different set of stakeholders to participate in the conversation, I think, which was really helpful. It also really served, I think, as a catalyst to align some strategic priorities. So in the sense that there was already some really thoughtful work going on with regard to overall strategic plans, having the benefit of the racial equity action plan, which actually preceded the development of the department's strategic plan, created an opportunity to make sure we were really aligned and thoughtful about how the work fits together. And so I think having the executive order, having the opportunity in creating this space where department leaders could really engage together and think about it with regard to metrics and other specific things, I think was really helpful. Certainly the spirit of equity was always present, but kind of having those conversations and thinking about plans and also accountability was something that was really beneficial. So that's something that I think was really huge. As a part of that work, I really co-lead, similar to an internal and an external structure as well, where I focus most on our external work, and we have a Department of Administration which focuses on our internal work. And so having that racial equity action plan really allowed us to see across the department to think about what opportunities might look like, how our efforts could be aligned, and really better work to meet the needs of communities and stakeholders who were engaged in that process. It has also created a way for us to be thoughtful about the mechanisms that we receive feedback. So we have a regulatory process. That process is formal, but it really encouraged us, I think, to think about more informal ways to gather information, right? So one of the things that the department did in anticipation of a new regulatory package was create a YouTube video, right? So for folks who weren't able to attend the formal hearing or participate with public comment, it just really gave us another way to engage with stakeholders. And so I think being really creative about how to deliver most effectively for stakeholders, especially people who might not be engaging in ways that historically stakeholders have engaged, I think really created an opportunity for us to sit down together and think about how we might better just serve constituents and stakeholders. So that's been really critical.
Okay, so for in CARB's case, the California Air Resources Board, I think there were multiple things very similar to what Eugene shared, that there were multiple things in the works already going on when the governor's executive order came out. But having the governor's executive order really reinforced, right, some of our the impetus for doing that work, reinforced some of the foundation for that work, and allowed us to kind of point to the fact that from the very top, the message and the priorities and the new standard that we're setting throughout state government is that we are prioritizing racial equity, that we are prioritizing equity in everything that we do and embedding that in our work. And I think that has been really powerful in just helping to allow us to, again, be able to point to that there are times that I'm sure folks are aware we do receive pushback, in this space as we're working in this space and trying to roll out these conversations in our organizations. Talking about race is hard, talking about equity is hard, right? And it's uncomfortable, and sometimes people are reluctant to do the work, right? And so it's been helpful to be able to kind of point to that, right, as a directive for why we're doing this work. Just really reinforcing. Greg talked about some of the, the support that we have within our organizations for us to even be here and be where we are. For me, I report to our Deputy Executive Officer, Edna Murphy, at CARB. And I mean, everything you said, Greg, without folks advocating at the highest levels for us within our organizations, we couldn't do the work that we're doing. Right. Our entire executive team at CARB, led by our executive officer, Dr. Steve Cliff, they're all very supportive of the work that we're doing of advancing equity work. But again, it's something that needs to be a message that needs to be reiterated at every level of leadership, all the way up to the top, right? So even though the executive team on our at CARB was reiterating that, we have that from the Office of the Secretary, right, for Cal EPA, but then having that from the governor to point to as well really helped to strengthen things. I would say we have, Eugene talked about the REAP, the Racial Equity Action Plan that was a part of that, the governor's executive order. CARB has one for 2023 that we developed after that executive order came out. And so we have, in that plan, we have 4 objectives. We have 2 internal facing and 2 external facing objectives there to really help us embed equity in our work and make sure we're keeping our eye on that as a goal as we move forward, right? other than that, we have just a general approach at CARB for like leading with race in our equity work. And so that, acknowledge we are very much aware that equity spans, many areas, right? There are many marginalized identities, right? But leading with race acknowledges that that race is a leading predictor of negative life outcomes across many areas, if not all of them. And also when folks identify as a marginalized identity, as well as of a marginalized race, right, as a Black, Indigenous, or other person of color, those impacts are felt deeper, right? And so we realize that, this is where we have to center the conversation. And so that's how we're approaching really embedding that focus on racial equity in our work, as well as being really explicit about the link between racial equity and the mission of our agency, which really cannot be separated. And so at CARB, the mission of our agency at the highest level is to protect public health by cleaning the air. And we know, like indisputably, science, the numbers shows us that race is the #1 predictor of exposure to unhealthy air quality. It just is, those are the facts, right? And so as we're working to protect public health by cleaning the air, we have to start with those who are most impacted. And when we do that, and improve conditions for those that are most impacted, we improve conditions for everyone, right? And so those are some of the ways that incorporating racial equity into our work, and then also the governor's executive for a lot of that work.
It's hard to follow such amazing colleagues. But I will say that the water boards have made a big commitment. It's quite impressive for me to see, and it's actually quite emotional to see what the water boards have done and the Cal EPA community has done, as well as the larger state of equity and health and all policies in just 3+ years of sort of deep focus. So the way that we've been working with the executive order, again, we were doing a lot of this work before, but the order really solidified and gave permission, as my other colleagues said, better for us to continue doing this work and to spread it out and to really reinforce that, not only internally, but with the community. So we adopted a resolution in 2022. In early 2023, we brought to our board a final racial equity action plan building off of the resolution, all of that through civic and community engagement process. Could be better, but that's what you do, is you learn as you go. And then out of that, we have all sorts of projects that, again, we're already beginning, but they've really been put into stronger motion, including this capacity building. So I'll talk real quickly about that. The water boards, following the model that was developed at Cal EPA, have a train-the-trainer approach. So we now have close to 20 certified, coached, mentored trainers within the organization at 6 to 9 hours of content building off of the GARE model. And then across Cal EPA, that number goes into the 30 to 40 range, probably easily, of certified trainers building the capacity of our workforce and doing these trainings on a regular basis, repeating them, focusing them for management and executive groups and what have you. So it's not just a check the box approach of delivering training. It's a thorough follow through, including workshops on racial equity tools and all the data work that needs to be done around that. So my director of office job is really about data and transparency. So that was the bridge that brought me into racial equity, was a deep commitment and appreciation of what it takes to be transparent government. So this work is very much in line with that. And again, capacity building across Cal EPA and the state with Jasmine and Michael and Kieran's leadership. We're developing data access or data tools that would be accessible to all folks. So open source code for the tools so that they can be reproduced and reused without somebody having to do it from scratch. And we're holding conversations about what does it mean to use an equity index or an equity filter or a racial equity filter for your work, so that we're not all reinventing sort of a magic BIPOC button, which BIPOC was defined earlier for you. So like there's a really good network of folks doing this work that is a hard story to tell, but I'm trying to paint a picture of how the water boards and all of us are working together. On the external stuff, the water boards are using the order to advance work in areas around safe and affordable drinking water. We're also not just stopping with that, but we're going to the groundwater management, resource management as sort of an underlying foundation to that. And then even one of our pilot areas of advancing racial equity using objective and key results, the OKR approach, is the site cleanup program, which is really about where are you spending your money to rehabilitate not just communities and the economic forces within them, but also taking away pollutants and health hazards to the community members. So there's like this vector that slices through on the drinking water. With tribes, we're doing a lot of really interesting and amazing work, again, with data to support them to advance their practices and to advance their interests, because it's very hard for them to engage with our regulatory processes, especially when we're collecting data that doesn't reflect what they actually do and care about most. So there's, again, these ideas of how we work with our communities are being practiced through this intentional capacity building effort within Waterboard, but not just siloed. It's Waterboard with health, with cannabis even, and with the larger community of state agencies. So thank you for your leadership to allow that to happen.
Thank you so much. And it's really great to hear that although racial equity work had been previously taking place prior to the executive order, that it really helped to serve as that catalyst and foundation to help agencies and departments move from normalizing to operationalizing racial equity and thinking more strategically and identifying ways to be more accountable to this work. I would love to continue asking a lot more questions, but I know we're running short on time. And so our next question is, what are some persisting needs to effectively move this work forward?
For sure. Tough question. Certainly, I think one of the things that we've described previously is really alignment and giving, I think, staff permission to really engage in this work in a really thoughtful and intentional way. I think at the Department of Cannabis Control, we've been very fortunate, not only because a lot of kind of the ideas around equity were really embedded in the regulatory process and the legalization process, but with racial equity at the, in the governor's office, at the agency level, at the department level, really saying that this work is important. And we want to be thoughtful about how we incorporate it into all of the work of the department. And so that creates a kind of understanding across kind of all of our colleagues that the work is going to be prioritized. And so it gives you, I think, people permission to be creative and thoughtful, even about kind of addressing kind of how things are working now and how we might have additional opportunities to do something different, using the conversations around equity and racial equity to be really thoughtful about rethinking just some of the existing practices. And so it gives folks, I think, permission to really engage in creative exercises that I've seen be really, really beneficial. And so not only in thinking about kind of programmatic approaches, how to think about our regulatory process in different ways, but also things like communication, right? And so one of the things that we've seen is that, cannabis equity, like a lot of our work, is really complicated. And so there are a number of state agencies who are working to really support this work. But one of the things that we've noticed is that stakeholders don't always have an appreciation for how this work fits together. And in some instances, nor should they care. And so, right, thinking about how we can deliver, whether it's guidance documents or forms or interviews or content, in a way that does not expect stakeholders to really understand how state government works, but to say, how do you define yourself, right? So if you're a business owner, or you're a local jurisdiction, or you're an individual looking to have your criminal history expunged, right? Those are really entryways to get into the conversation and thinking about that information and how can we share that instead of like, oh, you want to apply to the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development or the Department of Cannabis Control's grant opportunities, to really streamline information and think about it with, stakeholders at the start.
I'm thinking and talking at the same on the fly, so bear with me. I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to recognize the resources it takes to do this coordination. It's often sort of like, oh, well, I can go to meetings, but I can't do the extra work to make what we're doing at my office and agency available on the hub, on the portal that the Strategic Growth Council has presented. That takes work. It takes a commitment of resources that often the staff may even want to provide, but their executive chain needs to sort of understand this is part of it. This is the 80% that gets it done. It was good that you did the product, but now to make it available to other state agencies, it takes a lot of support and a lot of resources. So I think, I'm not asking for additional resources because, you don't do that, but I'm suggesting that we have a lot of resources, but we can use them in a way if we're aware and intentional about the commitment it takes to make a difference, because that is the difference. You put a thing on a place on a web page that's a map for one agency, it's a one-off product. But if you turn that into a product that can be reused and engage with the community, like not just other state agencies, but really leaning into finding out how do we empower the local governments, the community-based organizations, the NGOs, and the actual community members that want to see this change. And so that takes extra work. So I'm not quite sure how to solve that puzzle, but I think that is like the elephant in the room for a lot of what I work on.
My department within CARB, I think there are many, oh, sorry, hopefully you can hear me. Okay, so for challenges, oh boy, how much time do we have? No. I think for sure resources like Greg talked about. I actually work pretty closely with Greg in our Cal EPA racial equity team. And supported also by Moises Moreno Rivera up on the dais. But having those regular touch points with our Cal EPA racial equity team leads is great, and it like helps to support the work that we're doing as racial equity practitioners. I know that I'm always learning and growing, and love to be able to engage in spaces where I can continue to do that and leverage resources and things like that. But that resources issue, we keep coming back to it, right? We don't have enough people doing this work. And, the governor's executive order came out, there's support, my executive team, which is great, but really we need bodies on the ground doing work, right? And so my position is the first position that CARB has that's full-time dedicated to internal equity, the first of many, I'm hoping. And also acknowledging that, there are many needs. We have legislative requirements that we have to meet, right? We have timelines that we have to meet, but how are we prioritizing, putting our actions behind the words that we're prioritizing racial equity, right? And I think that's not just a problem unique to CARB, right? That's just across state government in this work. So resources. I think another challenge is that building capacity for staff takes time, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And it can be frustrating at times when myself, others, other folks on equity teams that I'm working with and a part of are putting in so much time and effort, and change is so slow. Organizational change work is slow. This is a transition, right? And that can be frustrating, right? So that's definitely a challenge going forward, and making sure that we, as practitioners in this work, people doing the work, that we are, one, spreading the work out, so it's not just the work of a few, but also that the folks that are doing this work are taking time for rest, right? Because this is hard work, right? This is hard work. This is very personal work to a lot of folks doing it. For me, this is life and death work, right? So we have to also make time for rest. I think, and it's important to underscore and say that making time for rest and taking time to rest does not mean we're not as dedicated, right, to the work. It just means we got to take a break before we come back, even better and stronger, right? I will say, let's see, last thing for challenges. I think for us within CARB, I will say, like, I talked a little bit earlier about how we are being explicit about how racial equity cannot be separated from the mission of our agency, right? And I think, as I said, organizational change work is slow, right? Like, I can say that until I'm blue in the face, and I constantly do. But it's going to take time for folks to receive that, to be able to really learn what that means for their programmatic work, right? Because across CARB, we have there are a variety of things that we do. What does that mean, and what does that look like in your own programmatic work? How are we making this embedding equity? What does that mean within our organizations? What does that look like? How is it going to be sustainable? And how are we building foundations to continue moving this work forward once we've moved on, right? Or when we're no longer doing this, right? To make it so that the work that we're setting in place can't be undone in the future, right? And so that'll be a challenge that I think we all collectively will be facing as we continue to move forward and think about what does it look like to actually operationalize racial equity with the specific programs and things that we work on.
Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly. I just wanted to say another thing that has proved to be challenging, especially as we're having these conversations often for the first times with stakeholders, is how we're, one, managing expectations, and two, in being clear about kind of defining things that are sometimes challenging to define, right? So, for example, the difference between equity and cannabis equity and racial equity, right? Those terms mean different things to different people. And so there is a situation in which they're coming to the work with different understanding. And so having the opportunity to really have those conversations to think about kind of what opportunities look like concretely and how the work is going to be done at the agency level, at the department level, and how that is really borne out in kind of policies and practices, I think is critical. But it's really important to kind of have conversations, honest conversations about what opportunities and limitations might exist.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I will now turn it over to council to ask some questions for a few minutes. Chair Sep, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, panel. Thank you, Hugo, Eugene, and Greg for sharing your thoughts on this. And more importantly, I think for the work that you do with your own individual agencies. I think this is the way I see it is the issue around equity, and specifically on racial equity in general, is where sustainability was about 30 years ago in most of our practices. When it came up, this is like, wow, how do we embed sustainability in our practices at every aspect of it? So it's not an easy work. It's a long-term effort, but worthwhile effort. And what I'm really proud about is actually what the state is doing to actually put its money and resources where its mouth is. I think this state in many ways is tackling it head on. And one of the biggest challenge is to how you institutionalize that. And I'll start by, a week ago, I was so proud to stand up and swear in Racial Equity Commission, the first of its kind, certainly for the state, but I think anywhere, charged with advising state agencies how to embed equity, what to address, and advise the legislature and the governor. That is a big step in really recognizing the importance of that. My colleagues here last year, we had a lot of discussion around this. I was so proud to hear the leadership here also embracing it way, before in tackling the issues in terms of what that means. And for me, look at the leadership in this room and those who left here. That's what, to me, equity means. It's really representative at the leadership level, but more critically, the work that is done at a workforce level, but also programmatic levels. So those are not easy work to do, especially in the context of the climate that we're in. Not the environmental climate, but the social climate around those kinds of issues. So, kudos to you, to all, and the leadership that say this is really important and we need to do it. It's important. What we learned from the accessibility movement is solutions that came out of the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, help everyone. No one thinks twice about when you walk on a sidewalk and you have a slide ramp. I ride my bike everywhere and I use the sidewalk sometimes. I don't think about it, but for the ADA, I would not have benefited from that. That's how I see sort of tackling equity issues as well. So that's kind of my perspective, but I just want to open it up to council members in terms of questions and discussions.
Go ahead. Oh, all right. Yeah. Age first. Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate it. I want to echo the chair's sentiments with respect to California being a leader in this particular regard. We are because we choose to be. Other places could choose to be. They're making their own decisions. But I mean, what a beautiful state we are creating when we can have this kind of an open conversation. While other states are choosing to whitewash the past and what BIPOC communities, particularly Black and African American communities, have had to suffer and endure in this country since virtually its inception. Well, actually prior, from at least 1619, apparently. But maybe that you're really making progress as a people when you can have such an esteemed panel which includes such an earnest articulator of the importance of doing this work, who happens to be a white brother. I just want to congratulate you for the work that you're doing, and for the earnestness with which you obviously center this in your own life. I'm particularly interested in racial equity and inequity discussions in the context of organizations. In the private sector, it can have a very different character, because in the private sector, what I'm really speaking to is the dynamic between the internal organization, right, and an internal organization which is trying to relate to the experiences of people outside of the organization. In a private sector context, that exterior population, maybe the main one typically, is the customer base, and that could be experientially and geographically very far removed. But in a public agency, right, the exterior population is mirrored ideally, and in this state very often, right, by the workforce. And so, particularly in the context of CARB, is it Ms. Eke Simmons?
Eke Simmons.
Eke Simmons. So I'm interested I'm wondering if you might shed some light on the dynamic that goes on within your organization, because you've got a team that focuses on the internal conversations, and apparently your public-facing team that focuses on the external conversations. And what I'm wondering is what kind of technology transfer and idea sharing is there, particularly from an experiential narrative, between the folks who work with other folks within the organization and those who work with people on the outside?
No, thank you for that. So we work really closely. I always use the default to the collective we, but our internal equity team is a team of 2 right now. So our Deputy Executive Officer, Edna Murphy, and me, as we kind of create our internal equity program. But we work very closely with our Office of Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations, right? So that's our external facing folks, the folks that also our Office of Community Air Protection that works on AB 617 and things like that. So we work very closely with, I personally work very closely with folks in both of those areas to make sure that we're staying aligned. We have regular touch points to talk about like what's going on in respective areas, just so that we're staying kind of coordinated and that we're really taking a holistic approach to how we are embedding equity in our programmatic work at CARB, right? And as well as identifying and addressing those barriers to equity within the organization. So I'd say definitely the coordination and the collaboration is key there. Thought partnership, me, reaching out to ask them, hey, what do you think? These are the things I'm thinking about as far as priorities for our internal equity work, developing our workforce capacity, et cetera. Getting feedback on that. I think the collaboration is key. And then I will also say that, one of the things we're doing a lot of training internally as well. We have the advancing racial equity training that Greg shared about, that we're rolling out within CARB. We also have, we're also looking at other opportunities to bring trainings in as we identify kind of gaps and in areas where folks, and we can further equip our staff and give them guidance on how to actually do this work, right? But I think as far as like how the internal piece is working with our external folks, we really try to approach it with a holistic way. And it's brand new. I just started in this position since February. And so we're still kind of, working out the kinks, but really I just try to stay in constant, conversation with them to try to, make sure that we know what's going on and that we're also presenting kind of this like coordinated front as well. I think there is still confusion within our agency related to like the internal external piece, right? Because for a long time it was just our Office of Environmental Justice, Tribal Affairs, and Border Relations, and our Office of Community Air Protection. Internal equity wasn't a thing, right? And so as we're really trying to communicate that to staff, there definitely is confusion, right? So we deal with that and kind of continually having to explain what we mean by like internal equity. And it's not a versus, it's a collaboration, and it's the internal equity work really being able to understand, to have our staff understand what equity is. And how to break down those barriers is just going to inform how they're embedding that in their programmatic work, right? So it's really a collaborative approach. I hope that's addressing your question. I'm not sure. Okay.
Amazing. I just wanted to thank you, Ugo, for that response. Quite wonky one to end us on, but I think is exactly what we wanted to do, is to really talk about what this work looks like as we operationalize and actually move to initiatives that are in place, and then the sustainability of the work. So thank you. And thank you to our full panel, Jasmine, for facilitating. That'll actually close the portion of the panel. And then Lois, if you could pop up the discussion question, that will take us into the council discussion on this item.
So the question is, a central charge of the governance executive order is to ensure that agencies and departments explicitly consider equity and adoption of inclusive practices when developing strategic plans. How has this taken shape at your agency? And this is specifically for state agencies. So Sasha, please go.
Thank you, Chair. I could have stayed engaging with all the panel members for a long time, so I'm just switching my brain into the question, but I would love to chat with you all later and just want to thank you for being here today. This is now the second time that the council has had a really robust discussion and heard from state leaders, not just those on the dais, but those who are doing and leading the work and bringing so much creativity, boldness, and thoughtfulness to the work. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. So back to the question. I am excited to share a few things about actually the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, our first strategic plan. And in this, not only showcasing how our vision, values, and priorities, typical strategic planning things look like for the next 3 years. I'm looking down to share our vision because it's not embedded in my mind yet. Our vision is to create a thriving and equitable California where people have access to safe and affordable housing, consumers are protected, and civil rights are safeguarded. So while we normally show up on this council thinking about housing, as the executive director knows from her time at BCSH, we have a whole consumer services side where we are very proud to have Eugene as one of the team members leading equity work on the consumer facing side, where we deal and see with a lot of historical inequities. So in our strategic plan, equity was embedded in the drafting process, and it's really central to the implementation. The question that I would have asked for the panel, and I think we will continue to build upon, is how do we measure equity? So for example, Chair, going back to your example of sustainability, this is something that I think a lot of folks can remember. We can easily find metrics for environmental sustainability. We can easily find metrics for economic sustainability. And if you asked sustainability researchers, how do you measure equity? How do you measure social sustainability? Oh, it's tough. It's only qualitative. So that is, I think, something that we all need to keep working on to articulate how we're measuring this, how we validate qualitative information, how we take experiences and think about the work that we've done, the work that we have yet to go. And so I'm not saying we have that figured out, but it's a call to action for all of us. Some of the ways that we built in equity within our strategic plan may not feel entirely innovative, but I think it's important that we surveyed community and industry partners, not just the folks who reach out to us during ledge season, but all the time thinking about how we get deeper into feedback. And then we aim to incorporate really plain language. So this is more about accessibility of what we're communicating so that we don't sound, I think Public Member Capretz has called us out for this repeatedly on this dais for not speaking to people who we're trying to serve. So how do we do that in our strategic plan so that we can continue to call in partners into the work instead of making another barrier through another government document that doesn't translate well? And then to support implementation and help us embed equity across our agency, we launched an internal community of practice that meets monthly to coordinate activities, build a peer network, and drive continuous learning about how we're embedding equity in our policies and programs. And I hope that we can hit on some of the things that the panel named today as we work on implementation. Thanks.
Radha Krishna.
Thank you again to the panelists from Health and Human Services. We really want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for centering this work and really being a national leader. Everything that was on those slides you presented, Karen, are things that our agency benefits from on the daily, from the resource hub to the Health at All Policies Task Force to C-Corps, creating a community. We heard from some of the panelists that have been members of that community, and that's cultivated from within before the executive order, much of the growth in this space. Within our agency, everybody read the 35 pages of the amazing work happening across California and all of our agencies. And that's just a snapshot of it. It's something to definitely be proud of. But a few highlights over the year from our agency is having an agency equity officer on board, and across our 17 departments and offices, having all but one filled with its own equity officer, speaking to Eka Simmons' comment of you got to spread out the work. It can't be based on one person. And I just do want to mention too that Secretary Galley really wanted me to convey that gets to kind of measuring equity, which would be a great topic for a future panel. We have definitions and methodologies around that. And so one is our Department of Healthcare Services has put forward a health equity roadmap that explicitly named a 50 by 2025 initiative. So it is a matter of life and death. And for Black and Indigenous Californians, moms and babies dying at differential rates, the goal is by 2025 to decrease those disparities by 50%. And so that's very explicit racial equity work at its core, and a commitment that our Healthcare Services Department has put forward that we're very proud of, in addition to others in innovating Medi-Cal. And the last one I'll mention is justice-related work in terms of the disproportionate health impact of incarceration as well as policing. And so in 2023, California became the first state in the nation to be approved for a targeted set of Medicaid services to youth and adults that are in prison, in jails, in youth correctional facilities, so they get all of those benefits 90 days pre-release. So that is something we're very proud of. And also our crises grant pilot program that's in the Department of Social Services. Our panelist, Mr. Hillsman, mentioned that you have to design it with stakeholders at the table in mind. And that's exactly what this program did. It took survivors and family members of those who have been victims of police violence and included them in the design of these alternatives to policing in emergency response. So we're really proud of that. And I think appropriate 3 years after the murder of George Floyd and countless others to be having initiatives that are addressing those and noting our progress, but also that collectively we have a long ways to go. But thanks for being such a leader for all our agencies and bringing us together around this council priority.
First, on behalf of my colleague, Deputy Secretary Musavi, he just wants to express his gratitude to the panel and to say that the Transportation Agency will be providing their update to you all directly as they had to leave for an urgent meeting. Separately, before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to the Cal EPA community that showed up today, for the colleagues that were on the panel. It is, as the panel has mentioned today, that it takes a village, and not their words, my words, but their words is it takes a community, right? It takes a community to see this work, and it's a network. And so the fact that colleagues found ways out of their schedules to be here to show that community support, I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate that broader commitment, that when we are having these conversations, it's not in a vacuum, and then there's a whole group of folks that are backing us up. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the folks at the Water Boards, Air Board, and others that are here, particularly to support their colleagues. On the first question on what are we doing as it pertains to the executive order, Cal EPA right now is not currently embarking on a strategic plan. However, a number of our boards, departments, and offices are. And but before I kind of go into that piece, I do want to acknowledge that Secretary Garcia earlier mentioned our new environmental justice action grants. And one of the things that we did in these EJ action grants is that we actually interpreted the executive order to grant us the authority to add the environmental justice layer to these grants. That was an agency and policy decision, and it's actually within the program guidelines that are now posted on our website. So within our guidelines, it says Cal EPA is exercising its discretion to focus within those categories on projects that meaningfully involve and engage disadvantaged communities to serve environmental justice purposes. And that's our interpretation of the executive order. And we encourage other agencies, as they're looking at their grants programs, is that how they embed equity. It's not just about our strategic plans, it's all about all that we do. And that action within our agency was one that we wanted to showcase here today. I know that our colleagues here mentioned a number of the work that's happening within our boards, departments, and office. One of the things that I just want to say is that while the water boards were showcased here today, also the Department of Toxics and Substances Control published a racial equity framework earlier this year and provided guidance and step-by-step implementation to building and reinforcing racial equity within the department. Additionally to that, the Department of Pesticide Regulation it's in the process of updating their strategic plan, and within it will embed equity as consistent with the executive order. I know that our agency provided substantial updates. We're trying to, so we appreciate the updates that came from our boards, departments, and office, and we'll point you there just for the sake of time. The only thing that I will say is that this work of embedding equity, advancing racial equity, having practitioners here, the normalizing of these conversations and the interaction between agency leadership and staff, the interaction of folks in middle management, executive leadership within their own departments is extremely important, right? When we come into our workspace, our identities are not diminished, as mentioned, right? The internal versus the external pieces, right? When we present ourselves. So this executive order for a lot of our staff is just a validation, and they have shared the validation that they finally see themselves reflected. And now that we've been a year in, that there's been almost like the dropping of the shoulders of just that at the highest levels within California state government, there is a document that encourages the continuation of this work. So thank you.
Thanks, Moy. Anyone else? Secretary Ross, I see your hand.
I'm almost hesitant to go through my checklist, but I think it's really important. A couple of comments that have been made. One, Frank's question about private sector ways of operating and how do we bring that into institutions? And then just now the comment from EPA. For me, we will not be successful in embedding equity if it is not part of our culture and the change that has to happen within our own institution of the Department of Food and Agriculture. I say that being very mindful of a very painful fact of life. And it's hard for me to acknowledge this because I love the industry that I'm in. I was born and raised on a farm. But agriculture is one of the first industries of building America, was built on racism. And it has been a structural system, most evidenced by actions, policies, whether it's lending or access to more opportunities through the United States Department of Agriculture. I was chief of staff when 3 major lawsuits were being settled, one for African-American farmers, one for Native American farmers and ranchers, and one for Hispanic farmers and ranchers and women farmers and ranchers. And so understanding that if you cannot change the culture of everyone that is out there interacting with the public and speaking for the public and advancing the policies and the practices of the public, we will not be successful as an institution at the Department of Food and Agriculture. So the work we've done internally started with C-Corp, which has been fabulous. We're skipping a year because we have a lot of catch up to do after COVID. but that really energized people. It can't just be top down, it has to be bottom up and top down. And those conversations have been energizing, they've been real. And we will announce just next week that our racial equity action plan will be announced publicly, and we will take 6 months to take it out to our communities. And those are not always going to be easy conversations to have. They aren't for anyone, but I think acknowledging the history and the legacy of agriculture and systemic racism makes ours perhaps a little bit more tense in certain communities than others. We need to make sure that we're investing in our people and the training to be able to have these conversations, to be able so that anyone who is dealing with our public or going out to engage our public knows how to have those conversations and to look around the room and make sure that every voice is represented and who's missing. And so that's an important part of our work. This will feed into the update of our strategic plan. We've done several strategic plans since I've been secretary. That's the beauty of being secretary for such a long time. We also, as a result of having the country's first farmer equity report that was released in 2017 as a result of legislation, we have a farmer equity advisor who's working with every program, every branch, every division on the equity issues of how we include the voices and make sure that our practices and programs are serving all farmers, regardless of where they farm, regardless of their language and their ethnic background. We had ad hoc committees for a BIPOC advisory committee and a small scale farmer and producer advisory committee that we worked with. They were advisory to me for the last 2 years during COVID. And we are now formalizing those as standing. Yes, Bagley, Keene, and everything will apply. Both of those committees have been formalized. We solicited nominations for them, and they were announced at last month's meeting of the state board, and their first meeting will start later this fall, and that will become part of how CDFA does business and solicits input from an advisory group. That does not replace community engagement, workshops, and roundtables, but that's that. We're doing a lot of work on our languages to make sure that we're going above and beyond what the law itself requires, especially for us in Spanish language, but the other languages as well. And using that as a way to create opportunity for the wonderful diversity we have at CDFA, where we are trying to raise our numbers from bilingual certified employees from 145 to 250 by the end of 2024. That creates an opportunity for people to bring something that they have as a gift and to be able to factor that into their professional contribution to the Department of Food and Agriculture. And we are going to require training for those folks every 4 years to make sure that we're keeping up with the latest in practices and the best training that we can do. The other thing that I wanted to add is just really thinking initially, because our grant programs are new and we can start with these, is how we have made adjustments, not just set aside dollars, but extending application periods, taking a look at giving additional assistance to applying for applications, staggering those application periods, and then a lesson learned from the Strategic Growth Council, the flexibility in delivery with advanced payments, and making sure that all of our materials are in the language that's most appropriate for the community-based organizations that are interested in applying. And I've already talked about technical assistance, and so I'm going to shut up now, but really have been inspired. The executive order just makes sure that we all know this is the highest priority, and equity is the way we do business. It is just the way every person within our department over time will know this is the way we do business. We've had the training, we're working together, we collaborate, and we have sister agencies that sometimes are going on the same pathway, and we can learn from one another. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Secretary Ross. Karen, and we've gone a little bit 10 minutes over time, unless there's any pressing comments from fellow, I'm sorry. Oh, Deputy Secretary Schwartz, I see your hand up.
I'll keep it quick because I know we're over time. And I'm really grateful for the conversation today. And I've just been, kind of sitting very quietly, taking it all in. But I did, and we're doing a lot, and I've kind of listed it and submitted it to the SGC. So I'm not going to go through all that, but we are kind of really looking at everything from soup to nuts. Everything from our mission statement to duty statements to, our departments are really, doing what they can to embed equity and environmental justice and everything that they're considering. But I did want to say that, I feel like when I look back on my own life and when I, have talked to my parents about when they got married, there were still anti-miscegenation laws in place, and they lost most of their friends when they got married, which is kind of hard to believe now, but it wasn't really that long ago. And, I went to a high school in, inner city and a really underserved part of Long Beach, where, a number of the families there were likely pushed there because of redlining. And I live in a house now on the other side of town, which, I would not have been able to own because of my race. And I say all this just to say, government played a huge role in institutionalizing racism. And that has really, impacted, I think, everyone's life, either for the better or for the worse. And we really do have a responsibility to do what we can to really unwind that. And the fact that this administration has realized that and has really kind of focused on that in so many ways is really heartening to see and to hear all of the progress that everyone in this room and all of your departments are making. It just warms my heart. So I just wanted to thank you all.
Thanks, Naki, for that perspective. And just in closing the council part of the discussion, I would just, echo what I said earlier. I think this state, Errol, can you imagine this kind of conversation at the highest level of government in the state of Florida or state of Texas? So there's a lot to do, but I think we have to also recognize the special place that this is. With that, we will go to public comments.
Thank you. We have 5 public comments on this item, 4 virtual and 1 in person. We'll have in person first, and I will begin the public comment period by reading the names of the individuals signed up to comment on this item, 8 on the agenda. Holly Nickel, would you approach the dais, please?
Good afternoon, Chair Asafa and members. Thank you for being here today. I'm so happy to be here and just hear everything that's going on in government. It is really heartening, as Nawaki said. Again, I'm Holly Nickel, State of Equity Program at the Public Health Institute. I want to first of all thank the Strategic Growth Council staff for carrying the torch of racial equity in their work so steadfastly. Really appreciate that. It's clear that you're putting racial equity ideas into concrete action. I look forward to watching you continue your racial equity work there. And huge kudos to the leadership of the council agencies and departments under your leadership. I love hearing about the ways big and small that racial equity is continuing to be normalized and prioritized in your entities to take actionable steps to operationalize racial equity in the procedures and programs of your organizations. Lots of times that's the hardest thing to do, right? Is take the ideas and put them into action. And y'all are doing it. Y'all are doing it. And I want to recognize you for that and thank you for that and celebrate you for that. No matter how small a change that we think we're making, if we're making it towards equity and racial equity, that's what matters. And so I appreciate all the work there. And beyond celebrating you all, I also want to encourage the council and related agencies and departments to keep going on their path of putting ideas into concrete action. It's really time to think strategically and intentionally about things like investing in capacity building for local communities to help them be able to access state funds better, relationship buildings with local communities, and to use the money that's flowing from state and federal government to address inequities in housing, transportation, ag, climate, and health, et cetera, to center to the needs of those impacted, which usually are Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities that have been historically disadvantaged and decentered by government. There is work to be done now to make racial equity a continued priority in implementation. Racial equity is mission critical to achieve a California for all. And additionally, if agencies and departments keep doing the work, it'll lay a great foundation and create readiness as the Racial Equity Commission gets footing in the coming months. So let's keep going. Onward.
Thank you. We have four virtual public commenters on this item. For virtual comment, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in the Zoom. You can do this by clicking the raise hand function under the participants menu. Our first virtual public commenter is Vince Leus. Vince, are you with us?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. You may begin your comment.
All right. Hello, Chair Asefa and members. My name is Vince Leus, and I am an Associate Program Manager at Prevention Institute. At Prevention Institute, we work to achieve health equity and racial justice through a focus on primary prevention, which includes acting to pass policies that address the systems and community conditions that influence our health, safety, and well-being. We would like to thank SGC and each member's leadership in championing initiatives that invest in the community resources that contribute to our health, including through housing, transportation, environmental justice, land use, and natural resources. We encourage the Council to continue engaging in opportunities to make resources more accessible to frontline communities of color, including investing in capacity building resources for smaller community-based organizations to access state funds, which we are pleased to see has been a focus of conversation today, building relationships with local health departments and CBOs working in BIPOC communities most impacted by structural racism, and continuing the great work you all do to break new ground for equitable funding approaches. These approaches are racial equity strategies. And as historical federal funding comes down the pipeline, there is work to be done to make racial equity a priority in implementation. Now is the time to dig deeper into applying racial equity principles and approaches in state governments. I'd also like to thank the panel for sharing their groundbreaking racial equity work they are engaged in, and hearing about these efforts made me think it'd be so helpful for this work to be spotlighted in an SGC-sponsored report or video to share with the many localities across the state who are thinking about operationalizing equity in state government. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Our next commenter is Maria Barakat. Maria, are you with us?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Barakat. I use she, her pronouns. I am the program manager for transformative racial equity at the Green Lining Institute. At the Green Lining Institute, we work towards a future where communities of color can build wealth, live in healthy places filled with economic opportunity, and are ready to meet the challenges posed by climate change. I really want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for these updates and for the panelists today who shared their incredible work. I wanted to express support for the Strategic Growth Council's just overall anchoring of racial equity and acknowledge the breadth of the task across the state that you and statewide agencies are taking on. We want to encourage you to continue to center and apply racial equity principles throughout the implementation and priority setting for your organizations and for the council. BIPOC Californians remain disproportionately negatively impacted and bear the most burdens of a structurally inequitable system. Thank you so much, panelists, for all the work you're doing and for highlighting the needs that you're seeing on the ground, like enhanced coordination and increased racial equity resources, capacity, and even foundational racial equity definitions across the state and resources that can be shared across agencies. I look forward to seeing how the Racial Equity Commission can lay the state level ground for work and to provide the resources that you've described for racial equity and to provide more anchoring to your work and all the other agencies' work. We know that the Strategic Growth Council and equity practitioners around the state are doing so much in so many ways to make California's state level change possible. With the amount of money coming in from the federal government and the possibilities, the programs and projects being unrolled, there's big opportunities to implement these with robust, comprehensive racial equity practice and principles. We know that implementation is where the rubber meets the road. and that there's many intervention points for racial equity from the beginning of each program to the measurement of its outcomes.
Thank you, Maria.
The council.
Your time is
Thank
up.
you.
May we have your final thoughts?
No, thank you. That's great.
Thank you for your comment. Our next commenter is Paige Cruza. Paige, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Paige, we can hear you. You may begin your comment.
Sorry, is this, it looks like I'm unmuted, but I can't. There we
We
go.
can hear you.
Guess. Okay. Hi, my name is Paige Cruza, and I work at Ramey & Associates, a planning, urban design, and research consulting firm dedicated to supporting healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. At Ramey & Associates, we integrate a host of interrelated subjects: land use and design, sustainability and green building, public health and social equity, and engagement and visioning into planning and social research efforts. As an individual, I was also fortunate to intern with the California Health and All Policies Task Force in 2013, and was able to look at how different grant projects, programs in the HIAP member agencies integrated health and health equity into their RFPs and procurement process. So over the last decade, I've followed and really appreciated the work that the task force, the SGC, and many state agencies have done to further integrate an understanding of structural inequities into their work. I've been impressed by how the SGC and others in the California government have continued to rethink and shift how funding and other resources are allocated. So thank you for modeling how government agencies can walk the walk on racial equity. As everyone I think here would know and agree, systemic racism impacts everyone in the US at minimum, and California, and in addition to having unfair impacts on Black, Indigenous, Pacific Islander, Asian, and other people of color, and it exists everywhere in the US. So as we know, however, different people with decision-making power have a wide range of perspectives on what actions should be taken to promote racial equity, if any action should be taken at all, and if prior action should even be rolled back, which is why the SGC's commitment to working towards racial equity is absolutely critical to deepening racial equity work throughout the state. Speaking on both as an individual and on behalf of my colleagues at Ramey Associates, I urge each member of the SGC and your colleagues to implement Executive Order N1622 by integrating a robust commitment to racial equity throughout every state agency, and to consider racial equity in all of your priorities and decision making. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Our final public commenter on this item is Emily Bergano. Emily, are you with us?
Hauka, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You may begin.
Okay, I'll skip my introduction as I introduced myself earlier in the meeting. I wanted to communicate to the council, staff, and panel in a statehood founded on genocide of California tribal nations. This equity efforts will seem like milestones when really this is bare minimum work. It should be work that should have been done many years ago. So I don't want to I'm not discrediting any efforts made by the council staff or panel. I just want to acknowledge that comparing the work, the equity work that's being done to other state is not best practices, because this work is not an equity competition. And secondly, there are many statehood genocides still occurring today within tribal communities, tribal nations, and one major issue is the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples epidemic. Vocalizing this issue to the council and equity panel to prioritize this issue as we continue to do this important work. And lastly, as the council moves forward in the hosting meetings and any type of listening sessions or opportunities with the communities or leaderships, I recommend providing a loud acknowledgement to uplift the tribal nations displaced from the locations you all are meeting on or taking place on, as well as highlighting a need for action items to prevent what I call performative land acknowledgements, meaning it being a checkbox. And there is such thing as performative land acknowledgements, meaning we acknowledge the Indians, now let's do our work, but not necessarily include them in that work. So I want to make that recommendation in doing a land acknowledgement, but also providing some action items with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That concludes public comment on this item.
Great. Thank you for all of the public who provided comments. We now move to public comment for matters not on the agenda. Unfortunately, this is not a forum for dialogue with the council members. Questions posed by the public during this item cannot be substantively addressed or discussed at this meeting. Any required follow-up can be directed to Executive Director Lynn Blanco Libert for follow-up and responses. With that, do we have any?
We have no public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Great. Well, again, thank you everybody for attending today. Specifically, thank you, Lynn, and your staff and support staff as well, from Sarah to Michael to Julian and Lois, always for getting all the materials and organizing us. Thank you for your support, and then council members as well. So with that, we are adjourned.